Okay, good evening, everyone. Sorry we're running a few minutes late, just trying to get the technology up and running again. Thank you, gentlemen from the cable, Port Hub, appreciate all your efforts as we try and do these hybrid meetings. I'm calling to order the meeting of the Newburyport Public Schools School Committee for the business meeting of October 19th, 2020. Mrs. Kennedy, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Hawkeiser.
Here.
Mayor Holliday.
Present.
Mr. Bennett.
Here.
Mr. Cole.
Here.
Mr. Callahan.
Here.
Ms. Spalding. Here. And Mr. Reardon is absent.
Thank you. Could we please stand and say the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all.
Terrific.
Mr. Minnan?
Yes, we have our period of public comment through Zoom. Because of the technology, Mr. Callahan will tell me who is calling, and I will invite you to speak. I would ask you to limit your comments to something that is specific and germane to the schools, and we usually ask you to try to do within 2 minutes. We also find ourselves reminding each other that we are in a public meeting and we expect civility in the meeting. We're open for public comment. Mr. Callahan, do we have anybody who?
I see no raised hands. Miss Bui, do you want to raise your hand? Oh, there we go. Simone Bui.
Simone, if you would like to comment, that would be great. Can you hear me, Simone?
Oh, I'm sorry. I am muted.
Great. I think we've got you unmuted now, Simone.
Okay, hello?
Yes?
Okay, I can just barely hear I think there's only one voice that I can hear. And I think someone invited me to raise my hand.
Yep, you're all set.
Okay.
You're all set to speak. Yep.
Okay, got it. So I have a brief comment and then 4 questions about the transition plan as it pertains to the high school. So I understand that, like, as a school district, some time ago, we decided that we would adhere to the 6-foot distance minimum. But I also understand at the high school that if we're increasing to 50% on November 2nd, that we won't be able to adhere to that 6-foot minimum in some of the classes. And my concern is that we talk a lot about setting examples for our teens, which is so important, and creating health protocols that send a clear message to them. So I'm extremely concerned about our legitimacy when we're demanding or insisting that our teens keep that 6-foot distance minimum in school or out in athletic fields, but then we also say, 6 foot is not essential. So my 4 questions are, the first one is, what other classroom alternatives have we looked at the high school to accommodate all students at 6 foot? I know that people must have looked at it, and I'm curious to hear about why, the use of other alternative spaces in the school. The second question is, if the school committee does push forward with reducing that 6-foot minimum for some of the classes or the students, will parents be informed that their child is in such a classroom, so where the 6-foot minimum is not adhered to, so that we can make informed decisions for ourselves? My third question is, how do the quote-unquote specified surrounding towns factor into the decision to go to 50% for the high school? Amesbury's in yellow, West Newbury, Groveland, Haverhill, all are in red, and I've heard reference to these cities when they were gray or green as evidence that we can increase in person, but then I've also heard of reference to the red cities as not being relevant to a positive spread in Newburyport. So can you please explain how the different colors and how they're being used to justify increasing in person or not, or used to justify not waiting? The last question is, the transition plan states a decision will be made today, October 19th, whether to increase the high school to 50% on November 2nd. Given that we're just going into our second cycle of hybrid at the high school, if by the end of this week or next that the average daily test rate is 4% or higher per 100,000, will the school hold off on moving to 50%? And when will a final decision be publicly confirmed so that we can families can try to plan our schedules and lives?
Thank you. Thank you very much. Mr. Callahan, is there?
I don't see anybody else with raised hands. If you do want to speak, please raise your hand. I see none.
I will at this point then close our period of public comment and move on to the consent agenda. Do we have any warrants, Mr. Cole?
Yes, we have 3 warrants. The first warrant, I move that the following named bills and payrolls of the Newburyport Public Schools amounting in the aggregate $1,580.01 be approved for the city auditor to make payment and deduct the funds from the school's account. There are no conflicts.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor? Aye. None opposed?
The next warrant, I move that the following named bills of the Newburyport Public Schools amounting in the aggregate $2,132.41 be approved and forwarded to the city auditor for payment. There are no conflicts.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Spalding, for the second. Discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? None?
In the last warrant, I move that the following named bills in the Newburyport Public Schools amounting in the aggregate $475,401.98 be approved and forwarded to the city auditor for payment. There are no conflicts.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you very much. Discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None? Terrific. Thank you very much, Mr. Cole. We have a set of minutes, a voluminous set of minutes from Mrs. Kennedy for 9/21/2020. Do I have a motion to approve those minutes?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Discussion? Corrections? Or Holiday?
I just wanted to thank Mrs. Kennedy. I think this has to be one of the best set of minutes that you've captured during this whole pandemic, and I know how difficult it is to hear with our masks on, but I thought you did an excellent, excellent job on the minutes.
I said, thank goodness for you two.
Yes. Thank you.
You may be one of the few people who've actually said that statement, made that statement. Any other comments, recommendations, changes? Seeing none. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. Minutes passed unanimously. And I will turn this part of the meeting over to Superintendent Gallagher.
Yes, as part of following up on our updates on the FAQs that we published on our website and also that we included as part of the minutes, we've asked Principal Furlong and Principal Wolf to come in, kind of go through some of the updates on the last couple weeks with the students in school. And then on November 2nd, we will have the principals at the elementary schools do their presentation in regards to the opening. So we provided some talking points for everybody, and I know Principal Wolf and Principal Furlong created some of those talking points so the viewers can see as they present. So at this time, I know, you know, we put all. They all have my back, so to speak, now because they're all behind me right now. So
I like it.
all right. So Principal Furlong.
Good. Can you hear me with my mask on? So we just thought we would give kind of a broad-based update. We've already kind of shared what our hybrid plan looks like, what our schedule looks like. So how have the first 24 days gone, both at the middle school and the high school? And this is just a cute picture of, yeah, let's see, I know how to do that, thank you. A cute picture of a student that in our 6th grade, we start every day with an advisory. That allows us to welcome the students in. We weren't sure with the social distancing and the bringing together of the Mullen and the Knox schools at the same time how long our morning arrival was going to take. So we decided to start with advisory for that reason, for also the reason as an opportunity to welcome our students into the school in small groups, both remote or in person. So every group has an advisory, and our 6th grade advisory team leaders bought each student a little succulent plant. And as tiny as that plant is now, 24 days later, I should have taken a picture, they've grown like double in size. So we know we're doing a little bit of nurturing. Our focus to start was really with bringing our staff up to speed with the health and safety protocols and spending those first 10 days making sure that everybody felt really comfortable about what were the mitigation strategies we were using, how it was going to work in their space, and then how were we going to make sure that when our students came on board, they understood what those were, and thinking through what might have been some of the issues with our kids. So the focus on the daily pre-screening, first doing that with staff, then rolling out to families at the middle school level, the parents do that. Wearing of masks, maintaining of social distancing, the cohorting and scheduling, and the contact tracing. So the cohorting and scheduling was something that took hours and hours of the time of all 3 of our assistant principals, K through 8, working together and trying to get, a cohorting that was going to work for families across all the schools, but also allows us to schedule our students in regards to their special education or 504 or any other particular needs that they might have in school. So that was, I think, the time spent before school opened, and now what we're finding time spent with some administrative time especially is contact tracing, and kind of come to that towards the end as Sean moves forward. Students, I think, are doing really, really well with all of the mitigation strategies. The mask wearing is going wonderfully. Social distancing is a little bit hard in some of our transitional time periods, as you might imagine. But at lunch, in the classrooms, I think we're kind of getting used to it, and everybody's just sort of working on it a little bit every day. Thought you might want to. A few of you have had the opportunity to walk the building, but for those of you who haven't seen what the inside of the building looks like with some of these new strategies in place, Angela Bick, Assistant Superintendent Bick, ordered us all stickers and signs, and that was really a recommendation of both Mike Allard and Jessica Sue in terms of having some visual cues for students about where they're supposed to stand. So if you look closely in that first picture on the left, there's some little feet on the floor. There's little feet on the floor kind of everywhere throughout the building, just to give kids a sense of, it's about 4.5 tiles. That's the other thing that we're saying to them when they're, running down the hallway with their buddies side by side, looking for that 4.5 tiles. The desks in the middle, you can see that's a typical classroom. They're 6 feet apart. We fit about 11, in some classrooms, 12 desks with that 6-foot spacing, and 2 teacher desks. Most of our classrooms have 2 teacher desks. And then on the right, you can see in our science labs and in a few other art rooms, we had those big tables, so Steve Bergholm was able to install sneeze guards in those spaces. The students stay in place, the teachers change classes. And then in our explore spaces, you can see on the left, Mike Allard helped us probably in 2 key points within our school building, and that was in the gym and in the cafeteria. Both of those spaces are places where we're a little bit worried about the air and the spread with the cafeteria because of having your masks off, and with the gym because we really did want students to be able to continue with the fitness routines that they're used to using. So you can see if you look closely on the gym floor, each student has about a 14-foot box, and in that box is their equipment. And in between classes, all that equipment gets sprayed down, and there's sort of 3 kind of zones within the gym that students know that they have a particular box that they go to. They probably spend about the first 15 minutes inside, and then the rest of the class they're outside. And we're using fields all over the space, the baseball field, the current practice field for lacrosse, and then what would be the old softball field. Then you can see our engineering space in the center there. What would have held 24 students at 24 computers now is holding 12 students so there's 1 student per station. And then the cafeteria, so some students eat in the cafeteria and some students are eating in their classroom. And they're swapping it up. So if you're in for 2 days a week, one day you eat in the caf, one day you eat in your classroom. And actually, it really depends on what group you talk to. So we had some groups kind of petition me, can we just stay in our classroom? We love our pod. We want to just stay together. It feels more casual. So we've been able to do that. Other students would rather be in the cafeteria. So we're trying to just keep working on that. Cafeteria was a little bit quiet for a middle school cafeteria the first few weeks, starting to feel like a little bit of noises coming in, a little bit of normal activity, so that's nice to see. The opening, we were really looking over the summer at thinking about the spring, feedback that we got from our students, feedback we got from our staff, feedback we got from our families. What can we do differently in the fall, knowing that we will still have some component because of the pandemic not going away, that our students are still going to be learning remotely to a certain degree. And we weren't sure. Obviously, we're planning from anywhere full remote to hybrid to, in a perfect world, a full in person. And so these strategies up here kind of are a way of hoping to circle around and build a lot of different strategies so that students would have a stronger experience and feel more supported by the school. And I think the same for parents. So at the top you see the daily advisory. I've talked a lot about that here. I think that is making a really nice difference. Our students have, most of our pods are anywhere between around 11 or 12, and they have one adult who they start their morning with every morning. And it's just a place for them to be able to ask questions, to be, welcomed into school. How are you doing? We've been doing, thanks to Assistant Principal Marcos, we've been doing video daily announcements, which you too can see on our website. There's a link here in this site if you want to check those out. So every morning a different teacher, and next week starting a different student. And with our awesome new Spanish program, we'll be doing them in Spanish next week as well, are doing the daily announcements. So that's the daily advisory. We're also using that time to build a little bit of, just doing some of those social emotional skill building that happens typically in a middle school anyways. Then we built a new website to kind of pull off of our existing website. That's also a link to it. Oh, do they have this show? When you get this, slideshows? Yeah. That's a link to it as well. So what's up there is just our health and safety information, our scheduling information, and we've started to put also some curriculum information on there. What you'll find for curriculum now is just our course catalog as well as our course syllabuses or syllabi, and eventually we'll be doing, similar to what we did in the spring, slideshows of our unit by unit so that there's a little bit of transparency and parents can see what are the standards that each course is looking at right now, what are the rubrics they're using for assessment, and what are some of the big projects that will be a part of that. Then going back to the other side, the daily live help. We were able to establish a daily live help desk. We're not getting a lot of traffic on that right now, so we're probably going to ease back and be able to reallocate that person into a different place. But I think for the first 6 weeks of school, it was really super helpful. People could just pop on and get their questions answered. Our goal was, please don't be at home frustrated, not being able to find your meet or get on or get connected. Let us know, we'll try to help. So together with our live help and our tech team's tech tickets, we're finding that almost any question is resolved within an hour. So I think that's been super helpful. We'll keep that going for as long as it is needed. The tech tickets will continue. That's a thing that existed even before COVID. But the daily live help, we're probably going to ease back on that a little bit. Our back to school unit is complete. Teachers are all sort of launched into their first unit of content. I think that went well in the sense of, again, welcoming students with a little bit of a softer landing, with a focus on what are the tech skills you're going to need to be successful, what are some of the student habits that you're going to need to be successful. And then finally, what I've been saying to my staff, and hopefully, I just want to say to the community as well, if you're struggling at home, please let us know. And whether that's you're calling the advisor, you're calling somebody on the team, or you're calling somebody in the office, if we don't know you have a question or you're struggling at home, we can't help to solve that question. So really hoping to embrace people with their questions, and rather than feeling like you're struggling at home or have to be frustrated, just give us a ring and we'll try to solve it. Our tech side of things, I think, is going pretty well. You can see that on the phone, that little got lag thing. I think that lag is probably the biggest word that I was hearing for the first few weeks. when we were rolling out with our new Google Classroom and our intensive unit was built in a really interesting kind of fun way using Google Slides. But what turned out to be a really cool interactive Google Slide activity was taking up a lot of space on our student Chromebooks. So when they were trying to use Google Meet and also be in this Google Slide and do their work at the same time, they were finding a lot of lagging happening. So our tech people were on that. They were suggesting strategies to teachers, suggesting strategies to kids, and put that out right away. So I can just see that up there. We're using technology to manage our courses. Google Classroom is our key strategy. Padlet is another nice way of just sort of gathering a lot of information and being able to share. We are using it to address executive functioning, so Gmail, managing your Google Drive, how do you communicate, connecting and collaborating through Meets. Also Padlet is good for that as well. Engaging, assessing, and creating. And so some of these are strategies that a good integrated technology instructional strategies, and some of them are new to us. So it's, I think our teachers spent a lot of time this summer coming up to speed. Up there you can see some of the main apps that we've been using, and I think that our teachers have been doing really well, and our students, that intensive unit was teaching them all these different little pieces. If they didn't know Flipgrid, they had a little activity about Flipgrid that wasn't graded, that wasn't a part of their curriculum, but was just an easy way for them to get to know how to use Flipgrid or how to use Edulastic or some of the other technologies that we're using. And of course, curriculum instruction continues. Superintendent Gallagher kind of set us on this path of looking at a skills-based approach to our curriculum. This is about a year and a half, 2 years into that work. We have a lot of our units really well designed, and I think that that's been lucky for us because a skills-based approach in this type of hybrid teaching is really very effective. So we're going to continue to push forward. Although we don't have the early release time, we do have some faculty meeting time. We do have time of common planning amongst our teachers to push forward and see if we can continue to get our whole full year of curriculum in a skills-based kind of a model. And then we're also it's been sort of a goal of the NOC to really look at student voice and to enhance the quality of dialogue and discussion that's happening in the classroom. So towards that end, a team of teachers from 8th grade continued to work with Essential Partners over the summer and are right now actually rolling out some dialogues. They, along with their speaker series, which has been sort of restructured to have better questioning and a better use of the technology of Meets to manage a classroom like that, that's kind of all been built in. So instructional strategy I think is going to continue to be a focus for us for this year, especially because of how do you get kids engaged while they're at home versus while they're at school versus while everybody is remote together. And that's that. I'm going to let Andy talk unless you want to take questions now.
Sure, why don't we take some questions? Does anybody on the school committee have some questions for the principal? Mayor Holliday.
Hi, thank you so much. I appreciate the update and the details. Could you just talk a little bit about the percentage of students who might not be engaging at this point?
I think that we have students maybe who are not completing their work, but we don't have students who are not engaging with us.
That's good to
So
know.
I'm trying to think like how are you defining not engaging? We are every day taking attendance, aware of who is in school, who's supposed to be in school. If they're not with us, why are they not with us? We've had we're averaging about 11 to 13 students absent a day. So they're either participating remotely or they're participating in person, but our attendance rate is actually looking really pretty good.
It's good to hear.
Whether they're actually completing their work as a young middle school student who may be struggling with that regardless of whether they were remote or not remote, we're also trying to really look at that and our teams meet every week on what we call a child consult or a student consult to kind of just go through who seems to be struggling, who's missing work, what's our strategy to get them up and running. And either Nick or I meet with them on that monthly.
That's wonderful. That's great news.
Yeah.
probably better attendance than normal.
Yeah, I think so.
no place to
I
run.
think because, you'll see when Sean speaks that some of our pre-screening is causing a family to think, oh, we've got a cold in the family, so we're not going to send our young person in. So what we've been just doing at the team level is, does it make sense, depending on what that team is doing for their virtual lessons, for that student to just pop on with the other cohort, or doesn't it? I mean, sometimes it does not make sense, and the teachers are going to get them up to speed with a different type of work, just like if had you been absent. But sometimes it is working out that they can join with the other cohort, and it really just depends on how the team has their week structured.
Other additional questions? I actually have one. Can you talk just, I know that at both the high school and I think at the middle school, we've had to do some quarantining of students. And could you just talk about how that process is working? Because it seems like quite challenging to have students toggling in and out and gone for 2 weeks. So can you just talk a little about that, how you're experiencing that?
Yep. I mean, the student not being able to come into the school building, that side of it.
Right.
Yeah, so, I mean, I think it's similar to how I was answering Mayor Holliday's question, in the sense that each team is taking their approach to how they're doing their lessons with every day, a teacher has 5 classes that they teach, and they teach 4 in person, and the 5th is remote. And that 5th remote class is with all the kids who are kind of out there in virtual world on their remote day. And then they flip-flop. So for some teachers, there's a sequence that whatever it is, the thing that I'm teaching, the lesson I'm teaching with those 4 people live, I'm also doing remotely. But with other teachers, they have a totally different lesson. When I see you in person and I only have 11 kids in front of me, I'm going to really take advantage of that and do a certain lesson. And when I have my students remotely, I'm going to really take advantage of some of the technologies and those tools and have a different lesson. And then the week fits together with a little bit of a flip-flop. You still have 5 lessons, but they don't necessarily go sequentially. So that is the tricky group of, you can't just take a student and say, oh, I'm going to have them join cohort A and be remote for 5 days if they're quarantined. So how we've been approaching that is each teaching team, through the advisor and through the teaching team, making a specific plan for that particular student who is quarantined. We're able to do that right now because our numbers of quarantine are not like massive at the team level. It's pretty much worked out that each team might have just a couple. I think if we were to get to the point where we had a lot of students, that would be difficult to make all these individualized plans, and we'll have to take a different approach.
Okay, that's helpful, thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Thank you, Principal.
I guess I just want to commend you and your team both for creating that separate website early on, because I think it really took that layer of pivotal information and it made it very, here it all is, kind of in a big stream. And that really helped, I think, a lot of people. I also was going to ask you to say a little bit more about what you just explained, because the model that you're using, I also want to commend you on that, because it doesn't seem, from what I hear, that the teachers are teaching both live and remote at the same time.
Correct.
And I think that that's, when I talk to students and when I talk to teachers I know, not just from Newburyport, but from a variety of states and districts, that's the ask that's turning out to be the most difficult. Mm-hmm. And I'll even come out and say the least efficient. Mm-hmm. Because trying to address both types of kids, it's not just not easy, it's, I don't know if it's feasible.
Yeah, and I think, I was saying that this summer, that 2 things that allowed us to do, I think, a little bit of a different approach than other schools is a middle school model lends itself to a little bit of a team-based approach to your schedule. So I think that worked to our advantage. And then the addition of world language gave us an extra player on each team, which allowed us to do a 5-class rotation on every block, if you know what I mean from a scheduling perspective. So those 2 things, I think, fitting together did allow us to envision a different type of model that didn't have to have the teachers doing multiple things in one class. Yeah.
When does You guys are on trimesters, right?
We are, trimesters.
And how long do we have until the first trimester ends?
I want to say December 11th.
December 11th. So
Yeah.
I know you were saying that we just got out of that introductory block, but parents can probably expect some like information on how things are going pretty soon then,
Yeah.
as teachers start getting into their own curriculum.
Yep, 100%. And I've also been encouraging parents who are just kind of like worried, like I'm worried and I'm not sure, are they doing okay or not okay? If they reach out through the advisor, because that intensive unit didn't have grades, but it did have a lot of feedback. So the teacher should have a lot of information to be able to have a good conversation with a parent about a student at this point.
You guys have open house like next week?
We have open house on the 28th, and then following that, we're going to have 2 sessions of parent conferences, which will be by Google Meets. And then our 6th grade next week is reaching out to all of their advisory groups to do each advisory group is going to have a small parent kind of mini open house question and answer. And then last week, Nick, Assistant Principal Marcos, I almost said Superintendent Gallagher.
I'll switch for a while.
Mr. Marcos,
Here are the keys.
AKA Assistant Principal. He had a drop-in session for parents last Wednesday for just a sort of a similar thing. Like, we're just trying to get to the community to say, if you're struggling at home, let us know. We'll try to help. Obviously, we can't take the pandemic away. We can't put more students in the school than is safe. But we would rather be a part of knowing about your problem and solving it than finding out about it on Facebook or anywhere else.
Great. Thank you.
Great. Thanks.
Principal Furlong. Principal Wolf.
Okay.
Commissioner Wolf.
Where is the, let's see, so thanks for having me. So here's our update in terms of where we're at the high school, where we've had a phased-in plan so far. Oh, and that's obviously not how you move it along. Oh, there we go. And so similar to Lisa's presentation, in terms of implementing our health and safety protocols. So unlike the other schools, our students are responsible for doing the daily pre-screener when they come in, and they've been great about it. They get it as an email that they then are able to download onto their phone, and they show us a green check when they're walking into the building. And if a student does forget to do it, they go through a different line, and they just give us their name and answer the questions. And it's really been working very well with the masks. Students, while in the building, have been great about wearing the masks. And then also even with our extracurricular activities and the athletics, maintaining social distancing. The school is set up for that purpose. Now, with passing time, it is a little bit different, where students are moving from one class to the next in the hallways, but our hallways are set up so they're just unidirectional. So there's only one way that students are walking in the halls, and there's only each staircase. So of the 4 staircases, 2 are upstairs direction and 2 are downstairs direction. So things are really set up to help the students maintain social distance, but just recognizing that when there is passing times, you know, there might be walking a little bit behind each other or potentially next to each other, but the masks are on. And then obviously, as going to be talked about in a little bit, just in terms of the contact tracing that we've needed to engage in a few times at the school. But still, I think it's important to stress that even with the cases we've had at the high school, there has been no spread that has happened at the high school, which I think is very important for the community to understand that our protocols work. And another thing, I think I have it in here. And so this is just a picture of the different signage that Lisa was talking about that we have throughout the building. But then also at the end of every week, we do a daily questionnaire for the staff just to give us so for us administratively, because we can't see every single kid all the time, but just to get a pulse of how they feel the students are doing with our safety protocols. And so we're at a 3.67, which is very good. Get to the 4.0, that's excellent. So I think it just shares, and really the feedback that we get from staff, sometimes what it is, you know, a mask may fall a little bit below the nose, but it's just redirecting. And so just to really stress, the students have been very good about following the safety protocols so far. So just to talk a little bit about how we launched the school year, our first 2 weeks, we had our orientation days where the students came in and they learned the protocols, and then they were able to go meet their teachers in person and pick up their materials and learn about the course expectations and objectives for the school year. And then we had our first 2 weeks, which were fully remote, but then we did run our in-person clipper blocks, where we were able to have each grade level come in together. They were able to meet their clipper block teacher in person, and then administratively we were able to go over our school year goals, and then we did an assembly outside. This is just a picture. We had cones set up on the football field, socially distanced, about 7 feet apart. The students were able to spell out clippers. We had Sullivan Studios there to take pictures. Just realizing it's, you know, trying to find ways to bring grade levels together. And we do have a student council meeting that's going to be up and coming, because the feedback that we got from actually both students and parents, that the clipper block, the in-person clipper block on those 2 weeks seemed to work very well. And if we can find a way throughout the school year to use that to get full grade levels together. Because regardless of, you know, the 25% hybrid or the 50% hybrid, there really aren't great opportunities to bring a full grade level together, and this seemed like it worked. And ideally, we want to try to make that happen. And so this is just the school year goals that we went over with the students, but then we've also asked the teachers to incorporate this into their lessons as well, and then also into their check-ins with the clipper block. We had a video that we shared with the students that we felt best encapsulated all four of or best captured these 4 goals, that in just recognizing that the year is going to be difficult no matter how you spin it, but that together, trying to bring out the best in each other, always seeking to understand each other, and that's where the dialogue comes into play. We had many teachers trained over the summer on how to teach the skills affiliated with dialogue, and we're going to be using those with the student council as well. But then also at the same time, no matter what pitfalls or challenges we face, that we recognize we're going to continue to grow from each of those situations as well. And then as difficult as things may sometimes appear or frustrating, that we continue to keep standing. And so those were the core objectives and goals that we decided to focus on. So this just gives you an idea of our clipper block, because we did have to adjust how we were thinking about this period. So ultimately, the beginning part of the period, the clipper block teacher does a check-in with the 15 students that they have on their caseload. And how this person is really forming is really a conduit for students. So if students are struggling with something, or they're having a difficult time navigating, whether it's the technology or it's any of the layers of school, the clipper block teacher really can serve as the in-between. I know for myself and Mr. Testa, we've already received many emails from the clipper block advisors just for students trying to help them out in terms of whether it's accessing the counseling or trying to get a better understanding how to do different internships if they're an upperclassman. So it's just a way for students to have somebody to access to help them navigate the structures of high school, which is something I think we will continue even beyond the pandemic. The other part, because we did want to provide enough space in the schedule for students to have time to complete homework. And so that's another big piece in terms of how the clipper block is being used. It's a time for students to get schoolwork done, but then the other nice thing is all teachers are also available to be able to provide extra help support during that time as well. So the student can email the teacher, or they set up a plan during their class time to touch base and connect during the clipper block to get extra help on assignments. The club meetings and grade level meetings, this is something that we're trying to move forward with so that there's an opportunity for clubs to meet as well during the school day. And I already spoke about how our student council, the primary focus of their first meeting is really going to be on how can we get grade levels together during this time. And then our NHS Action News, we initially had this set up for the morning of the Wednesdays, but in working with the students part of the TV program, they needed extra time. So now we're on the Friday Clipper block period is when the NHS Action News will be aired for the students to watch, and then the Clipper block teachers are able to engage the students just in conversation about the different topics that the students are sharing. So that just gives you an idea of what we're trying to do with our Clipper block period. Now with the hybrid instruction, we just completed our first cycle last Friday. So we are attempting to do synchronous instruction for students at home and in school. And obviously you just heard David, it is a lot that we're asking teachers to do. But they have really designed their lessons so that the students at home and the students that are on site are staying together with the curriculum. And you can see here with some of the pictures, we've also had opportunities with more so some of the upperclassmen classes where if it's a first period class, the full class is able to come together outside. So we've been trying to take advantage of outside spaces for that opportunity as well. But with the synchronous instruction, this is where the cameras that the NEF helped us to purchase really play a big role. So I can walk in, I've walked into several classes and the teacher has the camera on the class, the students at home are actually projected on the front board, the cameras have microphones, so teachers can actually engage the class in a full class discussion. And then typically what they do is then have some type of task that works into the middle part of the lesson before culminating it with some type of exit ticket or a summary of where they got to. But we have definitely learned a lot in those first 2 weeks. And so these are really the bullet points here. We definitely heard, especially from students, just if we can really think of a way how to better personalize the in-person experience for students while they're in a classroom. So that has been a focus of the ILT last week into this week to work with teachers so that we can support them in figuring out, all right, what might be the best kind of structure for class so that the students that are in school feel like things have been personalized for them. And then also we do recognize that there may have to be some adjustments to our schedule as we move forward. We've gotten some feedback on the Wednesday days, and it's funny, it's like 50-50. Some students like the 30-minute blocks. The other students do not like all 7 classes meeting every single all throughout that day. I spoke about the full grade level meetings through the Clipper block and our first student council. And actually, I have a mistake here. It was initially set for Friday, but it's going to meet next Tuesday because that worked better for all of the students. We have our first evening we've had 2 evening activities with the Poetry Soup last Wednesday. And this Wednesday is senior night on the field, and they're going to be watching a movie together. So just trying to find some things that we can do to keep things as close to normal as we can. And then also this one goes, shout out to Dakota Tucker, who's a student who's a junior at the high school. So last year where we were trying to do a lot of work, especially around mental health. So she was able to get us to apply for this program, Bring Change to Mind, which is really about opening dialogue around mental health and really trying to minimize that sense of isolation, especially that students can have in this time period that we're in. And so I'm excited that that's going to be able to get started. And it's really all about peers helping peers, which I think is huge. And so those are some of the things that are up and coming, but then also just really the learnings that we've had to continue to grow and improve week to week with what we're trying to offer our students. And so this is pretty much just the operational focus at both the Knock Middle School and the high school in terms of things that we've been trying to manage across the school year so far. So just the health and safety of everybody, from our protocols, supporting staff and implementing the protocols, and which has been great, which I think is attributed to, at least at the high school, how well students have been doing with the protocols, and then recognizing with student attendance, like at the middle school, our attendance when taken virtually and in person is very high. We're right now at 98, on average, 98.5% of our students are attending, whether it's virtually or in person. You know, since last week's communication, we've had a lot more students opt to go remote and stream in from home, and we've had other students just elect to not come in but work remotely, and we're working with those families to see if they're going to stay remote or if they are going to come back to the building. And I'm hopeful we'll get students to come back to the building. And so this just gives you an example of all the different things that we've needed to focus on, even with the staffing. So trying to fill for our leave positions, making sure that we had every student still in front of them, a certified teacher in the subject area. We had a decent number of staff who were on leave, but we were able to hire replacements that are certified in the subject area. And then a quote to kind of wrap thing up that Lisa actually found, just to kind of culminate the presentation.
Thank you. Do we have questions for Principal Wolf? Mayor Holliday.
I recently received, I'm not sure, maybe other members of the school committee, at least 2 emails from parents who are really concerned about, it sounds like they have either their brothers or sisters are out of the house or they're alone, an individual, and feeling, the expression was much more about social emotional than, and that they're really worried about the, emotional health of their child. So when you get an email like that, what do you recommend we do?
Oh, I would have them contact the high school, Tricia Blackstock or Michael Testa.
Okay.
So they meet weekly with the counseling team. And so there's been several students that the counseling team has been working with to really help with that sense of isolation or any social emotional needs.
So would some of those students who potentially are doing much more remote, maybe it's their option to do so, would they be invited to participate in the movie on the field and those
Yes.
kinds of things? Okay, and maybe they could be really encouraged to come?
That would be definitely the goal.
It seemed like it was the, again, the social emotional seemed to be the, real theme of, and it was hard to read these.
Yeah, and I think that's the biggest thing at the high school, because there is such a social element. I'm now DJ Wolf at the lunchroom trying to get some energy into the cafeteria, because just the way that the cafeteria is set up with desks in rows. What is nice is we have on the balcony now chairs set up that overlook the field. It's a great spot, and we can sit around 50 students out there because it goes the length of the football field. So a lot of the upperclassmen have been taking advantage of that. We're trying to get the freshmen and sophomores to go out there because they can talk to each other. The chairs are socially, they're about 9 or 10 feet apart, but they face each other, so it's just a better setup for students just to interact with each other. And then Mike Testa and I being in the cafeteria, we have music playing now, at least trying to break up that void that is there. And we're brainstorming with a group of teachers, how can we bring just different activities into the cafeteria as well.
So we're going to start calling you Hal and Wolf.
Yeah, I think so.
I like that.
We're just looking for ways to try to bring some fun into the school day. But then also, just even with our in-person Clipper Block days for students that were fully remote, because I understand, some families are uncomfortable with having their child inside the building, which is why we made sure that we had that outside component, and it was great. So some families brought their student for that piece, so they could be a part of the class picture and the different activities that we had done at the assembly.
Thank you.
Other questions? Ms. Spalding?
What percentage of your students are fully remote at this point?
So after last week, we did have an increase, so we're around 11.6% of the students now. And then what we've done, I sent out a communication earlier tonight, just around having people commit to a time frame. So right now, students can elect, they can stay, because some people are, like conversations that I've had with families a lot last week, they just don't want to, they want to keep their child out till they feel that there's less incidences of positive COVID cases, which I understand. So that's why we did, all right, let's get, but we also, in fairness to the teachers, they need to know who is remote and who should be in person. So we did put a time frame commitment on there. So right now, families can choose up till November break. We did it by the quarter. And so some families may choose to do it the full year. Others may choose to do it by the quarter because they're feeling more confident with everything that's going on. Brian?
Mr. Hockheiser.
Go ahead.
Sorry.
Go ahead,
No, you can
Brian.
go.
So I would have to think, like, part of it also is, do they feel that the education would be compromised with regards to coming or staying at home, right? So if people thought that there's no chance, like we got an email, we've gotten a few emails saying that my child just is not able to do anything remote, and people are really distressed about the idea of the kids being home. And I would imagine if a family felt that way, they would be more prone to tolerate a risk, right? Whereas other people are saying, I think the learning's going fine. Like you're saying, the class is the same whether I'm there or at home, so I'm not going to tolerate the risk at all. Does that make sense?
Oh, it totally does. Yep.
So I guess one question was about timeframes. Like if people are saying, I want to go remote, are they signing up for a certain amount of time? Is that, you know what I'm saying?
It does.
Yeah. And then is there a chance that if there are people feeling they really want their kid back in school, could we offer them those spots?
For the cohorts, I think that would, that would be something I'd have to discuss with the district about how we could do that.
It's just a thought. And I'm
Yeah.
thinking, like, heading into winter, I'm assuming there are going to be people who are more prone to keep kids at home, thinking that they're going to be inside more often. They're not going to have some of these outdoor opportunities. When we go up to 50%, they might become a little bit more nervous. Like we heard the caller earlier saying, now we're going from 3 to 6 feet. Our parents can be aware of which classrooms, and so we might have even more people stay home. And I'm thinking that maybe there's some people who are risk tolerant, and they're weighing the other side of this, saying, my child really wants to come back. Does that make sense?
Oh, it totally makes sense.
And so I guess one question is, and it goes back to the actual teaching and learning, is the plan moving forward to always have that dual pedagogy going?
That was our objective, so we would afford that flexibility at the high school. So like, for example, right now, we have over 50 students that are in quarantine from the incident last week and then some sporting events outside of school. And so this allows them to continue with the learning while they're at home. We also have, and this has been part of the conversations, which is why we decided to kind of give a finite amount of time commitment. And I get it too. So some of the students that we needed to quarantine were athletes when we had to do the contact tracing last weekend based off of where they were sitting in the classroom in proximity to the student who had the positive case. And so now they miss out on their sports. And so I think that's also something that people are trying to weigh. Because doing these after-school activities are very, very important for students and families as well.
And I would probably even say more important if you're concerned about the social emotional piece of schooling, that I'd rather, if I was that parent, I would rather stay home for the academics and come in for the school and not risk being contact traced.
Correct. And so that was kind of the thinking with the plan. By keeping it synchronous, at least we could afford people that flexibility in decision-making. But I think what we did learn last week is that we did need to put some parameters around it so that teachers could be aware of when a student should be in the classroom or they've elected to be remote for a certain amount of time.
Is there any way to, I know we don't want to promote people leaving, but is there any way to share what that looks like with the community to say, hey, listen, if you are thinking about this, here's what we're looking at moving forward, that, you know, we're allowing people to elect remote, but we're asking for a month, 2 months, 3 months, a quarter, whatever it is.
Yeah, that was the message that I sent home before this meeting, actually, was to talk about if you are interested. I pretty much shared, we did have an increase.
I'll have to triple
Yeah, no, I'm sure you were probably coming from work to here.
This thousands.
Yeah.
And I'll look into that just to read it, but yeah. So
Yeah, but that's kind of what I did in the message, is it was like the third piece in there, just about we have had an increase in students electing to go remote, but we are asking families if this is what they're electing to do, that here's kind of the parameters in terms of the time frame commitment. So if you want to wait it out to kind of feel better about sending your child to school, the first quarter would be up until Thanksgiving time, and then you can reevaluate after or just before Thanksgiving to let us know if you're going to come back to the school. But that's also why with whatever model we do, we have to still consider, we want to make sure there are seats in the classrooms for students if they're going to be coming back. That's an important thing for us to still consider.
Mr. Callahan.
My question was similar to Dave's, I guess. And I asked this before we even started school. If there's a family that doesn't want to go to remote academy, but their kid just is not getting anything out of Clipper Block that hour and 40-minute period and says, you know what, I'm not going. How is that being handled? Is that just say, all right, we know you're doing the work from home, or, because they're kind of taking a spot at that point. So kind of what Dave was talking about, if one kid wanted to come back, that spot it's almost like the school bus. You know, if they're registered for a bus ride, but they never use it, no one else can take that seat. So how are we handling that if a kid just never goes in but they're submitting all their work from the house?
Well, that's why we've asked people, so if a student is not going into school on their days, so Mike Testa is running those reports and having conversations with those families. And so now we have these parameters around, are you going to be remote, and this is what you need to commit to in terms of a certain time frame. Okay. So we can tighten that up. I think when we went into this, we were trying to be flexible, because part of it was about students, you know, if they weren't feeling well, that people would be more honest and open, knowing that, all right, I don't feel well, I'm going to stay home, but I know I don't have to miss my class. I don't have to feel pressured about missing my classes. I can log in from home. And that was really a big part of the thinking with the plan, and really trying to keep things synchronous for the students in the building and at home.
How are the teachers feeling about the synchronous
Oh,
teaching?
It's a lot of work. And a big piece of it is the ongoing feedback that they're trying to give for the materials that are being submitted by the students. And, you know, working to engage everybody simultaneously. And so that is a piece that we're trying to kind of see if we can come up with a better framework that helps teachers to better manage the class, but then also at the same time support their efforts to provide students with the feedback that they need on their assignments.
Are the kids at home up on a screen? Like, the document camera, that's what when you guys say webcams, they're like document cameras.
Yeah, correct,
right?
yep.
Right, so the document camera collects the images from the school and brings it home.
Yeah, it depends on whatever the...
But are the kids at home up on the screen? Like, can the kids in the classroom see the kids at home?
So I walked into a literature class last week, and the teacher, it was pretty cool. The teacher had the kids at home on the screen. The students at home, the camera was on them. But then the students at home, their voices come over the intercom system in the classroom. So the teacher was able to lead a full class conversation on the topic that was going. Now, that doesn't happen in every class all the time, but it's an option that a teacher can have based off of the goals of the lesson.
is there something technical keeping that from happening? Because that sounds optimal, right? That sounds like you actually have everybody in a zone together. Is there something technical keeping that from happening, or is it just teacher's preference, or is it a technology
I think it's comfort
training
level
thing?
with the technology and everybody kind of getting more accustomed to it. You know, some teachers, what they're doing at the beginning part of the lesson, they have the students on the computer screen and they have their students there, but then they can share their presentation projected onto the board. The students at home see the presentation, and the students that are in the building also see the presentation. And then that would be their opportunity when they're giving notes, and then they can ask questions. The students at home still come over the intercom if they are asking a question.
There are other questions? Mr. Callahan?
I'm not really sure if this goes just to Andy, but when was the Monday holiday? Last week?
Yes.
Right. So that was cool that the high school kids that would have been on Monday got to go on the Wednesday, which we didn't do at the middle school or below, right? So the next Monday holiday is until January 18th. So are you going to do that again? We're going to do that same thing? And can the middle school and lower schools do that, or do they not have the same capability? Because that cohort lost the whole day.
Yeah, I think that's all part of, as Andy was saying, as Lisa was saying, when we're looking at scheduling, we're adapting to the environment.
Right.
So I think for us, it's something that obviously we look
Was it
at.
just too difficult to do the lower school
No,
kids?
I don't think it's too difficult. I think for us, right in the beginning of the school year, we kind of got into a system. And because the high school's at 25% capacity, where they're not seeing the teachers as frequent as the elementary, working with Steve Burkholm, we did like all hands on deck the night before, because right now we have the cleaning on the Wednesday to separate cohorts. And when he was bringing in, Mr. Wolf was bringing in cohort back to back, we used extra custodians at night to make sure we clean that building.
Is that also sort of a test to see if we can do
Yes.
what we've been talking about?
Correct. Yeah, and I think that's something we're monitoring right now. And as far as families committing to the remote, we have the Remote Academy where families are committing trimester. With the live streaming, there's a lot of benefits to live streaming at the high school. But as Mr. Wolf is, as we're sending out messages regarding COVID cases and messages with quarantining, more of the high school students and families are concerned, so they've been switching from a hybrid to the remote. Now, Mr. Wolf is going to work with the families to get a commitment, because we want to make sure that the teachers are ready for the kids that are going to be in person along with the kids at home. So this is, I think, as we were saying throughout the year, it's going to be fluid, and we're going to have to adjust to the circumstances around us, so.
Thanks.
Yeah, I just wanted to sort of reaffirm that, on the one hand, I understand that people in the community want to know what we're doing and when we're doing it and how we're doing it. But I also want to remind folks that you have been saying right from the very beginning, let's get it open, and we're going to be making tweaks and adjustments all the way along. We're going to be doing it, in some cases, on an individual basis. And that's a challenge, but I think that's the best approach for the students and for their families, and for the teachers, certainly.
Yeah.
And then just to speak to, any emails that come in regarding social emotional concerns of a student, just please have them email Ms. Blackstock or the guidance counselor, because then they funnel them. They have the adjustment counselors reach out to the families, plus the adjustment counselors are starting to think through working on creating student groups that are able to meet, whether it's virtually or even coming in for the Clipper block, so a group can be together if there's a certain common interest of the students that are part of that group. So those are different things that we're trying to do as well.
Quick question. At some point in the next couple meetings, we're going to have a discussion about the calendar for the rest of the year.
Yep.
And the half-days, and I heard Ms. Furlong mention it, so I guess I'll ask both of you, although I'm not going to twist off. all the way around to see you, Lisa, but right now, I know Wednesdays are shorter. And are you guys able to use that time for professional development, or no?
So at the high school, we've incorporated common planning time. So our teachers, unfortunately, do not have a block that's the same where they're all off to collaborate on all of their lessons. So we've been using that chunk of time for teacher teams to collaborate on assignments. So if I'm a teacher if I have my 3 teachers that are teaching grade 9 English, that's an opportunity for them to get together, talk about the assignments, talk about the lessons. And so that's how we've been utilizing that time.
That's because usually content meeting times like that would happen during the day that you can't.
We typically aren't able to have those the way our schedule is set up, unless I use, rather than doing a staff meeting, organizing it where teachers are together in their curriculum teams.
I'm just trying to figure out how your needs are different now. I know the learning needs are greater, but I'm talking about like how the scheduling needs are different now than they have been in past years. And so you're saying that there's less time for your teams to get together now?
Well, this gives them actual time to do it. Whereas the time that they would have over, like, for example, last year was once a month with their curriculum team. Now they're able to actually get together when the lesson planning is a lot more complicated. And so it allows them to at least kind of divide and conquer in terms of generating the lessons and the assessments. And then, like I said earlier, you know, we need to kind of continuously tweak how the instruction is being delivered, so that we're better engaging students when they're in the classroom, so students are feeling like they're getting a more positive experience when they're in school and in the classes. And so that's where the common time just, it does help. It gives them a space where they can actually
I wasn't
share
questioning the
strategies.
need.
Oh, no, I know.
The need for the common
Yeah.
time or the reality that's more difficult this year than past. I was literally just thinking about the logistics of time this year versus time last year.
Mm-hmm.
And when we come to think about scheduling, what are your needs and how do we help?
Mm-hmm. I mean, I can speak for the middle schools. Those early release days, that chunk of like 2.5 hours of time where a content-based vertical team can meet. Our teams meet, they can meet daily at the grade level. We have a schedule that supports that, but they never can meet vertically. So to have like a chunk of time that's 2.5 hours allows you to just really, you know, dig a little bit deeper with the standards-based stuff, move that along, knowing that every month we're going to be moving that along. We're going to be looking at data and aligning vertically. I'm missing that, I would say, as principal this year. What we can get on Wednesdays is the hour-long planning block that we would always have. People are remote, so you know, we might get more efficient at how we use that and be able to use that for vertical time. Right now we haven't been, just because there's a lot to manage with you know, only on day 24 of school. And then we have our faculty meeting, so typically we'll take that 90-minute block every other faculty meeting, and that goes to the vertical work as well. So, you know, I don't know, I'm always going to be an advocate for more larger chunks of time, because, you know, like, you know, one hour lesson can take you 8 hours to plan.
Yep.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
No, anytime.
And I will
Do you need me
turn
to-
it over to Superintendent.
I think we added some slides over there. What is it, the arrow key? Yeah. All right, you scared me. I just, what we also, towards the end, and instead of just going over the numbers, I added our numbers to the slideshow here on the district data. So just a display for our viewers and our school community and also the school committee itself. You can see we broke off the health office statistics versus COVID-19 statistics as part of your informational packet. So if you look on the left side, this is the regular volume that we're having in the nurse's office regarding, injuries, illness, non-encounter, medication, administration, treatment, and then absence days due to illness is 232 days. And working with the mayor and talking to school committee throughout the whole COVID protocols and contact tracing, and being really over cautious and very, very thorough. Here are the statistics regarding COVID. Student dismissal, COVID exposure, 23. Student COVID-19 positive cases was 4. Staff positive cases at this time has been 3. As Principal Furlong and Principal Wolf have talked about, some of the outside exposures and outside activities have led to 68 students who are currently quarantined at this time. Staff quarantine currently is 3, and absences due to quarantine has been 89. And with from a 1 case to close contact, we've tested 61 staff members for COVID-19 this year, thus far. To break this down a little bit further, as you can see, when you have 1 exposure, you can look on the right side and look at the impact in the district. So the tallies are from each exposure when we found out it was a positive case. So as you can see, 1 staff member, and then on the right side, 2 staff were considered close contacts, were quarantined. On 9/16, we had a staff member that was positive, and on the right side, we had 3 staff members that had to be quarantined that were close contacts. And a couple of the messages that we've sent out to the district on 10/5, we had 1 positive case, and that had 12 NHS students and 10 kindergarten to 8 students. And right now at 10/12, our last positive case is 2 students at the high school. And you can see they're still in quarantine right now with those numbers. And I think for us, so up to this date, we've had 97 staff members and students quarantined throughout the district. So with every 1 case, there's hundreds of hours that go into the contact tracing. And this is something working with Mayor Holliday and the Department of Health and our team is, as we're talking about a fluid situation and not really understanding what the summer was going to be like coming into the school year, this is one area we're going to continue to work together, because the contact tracing is so essential. And it's not just the students that are in the school. When we have a positive case for either a staff member or a student outside of school that we're aware of, we still follow the same contact tracing protocols. So this has been, I think, a lot of work for our nursing staff, and I just really want to credit them, because I think every weekend we've had a case, and if we didn't do the contact tracing like you've seen in other districts, they're shutting down schools for 2 weeks because they don't know who might have been a close contact outside of school. And Kathy Riccio, her team, and working with Department of Health on the weekends have just been phenomenal in getting all the contact tracing, reaching out to the families, and then getting the quarantines ahead of time before people are coming into the building. So for us, for the district, we're seeing right now, as Principal Wolf said, at this time with our safety protocols, the 6-foot distancing, the wearing the mask, the hand washing, even though we may have had a positive case of a staff member or a positive case of students in the building, we have not seen the virus transmit to the positive case in the school to someone else in the school. What we're concerned about and we've said this on our messages, is the outside activities. And this isn't just for Newburyport, this is throughout the state, you know, in talking to other superintendents on the North Shore and the commissioner. It's, you know, the recreation, the sports teams outside of schools, it's other activities, dance, could be gymnastics. And then what's happening is AAU teams, tournament games that are happening on weekends. If a coaching staff member or a team member on those teams become positive, then those players on those teams have to be quarantined. And I think that's harder for us outside of the school district to really contact trace and to follow through on. And that's why we have a great partnership with our Department of Health, that we're really going to work together, because the outside of school incidences that we're trying to follow up on the weekends is really critical. So I think that for the district, and as we're in COVID, you know, that's probably for us going to be our biggest challenge. Because although we have students in our school system following the protocols, and during our athletic programs we have students following protocols, it's the AAU and it's these other organizations outside of the school system that is where we're seeing, not just in Newburyport, but as superintendents, where we're seeing the COVID cases bumping up. So that's where we're at for the kind of the district up to this date, and you can see it's been a lot of work. We're having our medical personnel and professionals coming into the high school tomorrow to look at different areas with Principal Wolf, to look at the schedule. And I know they're analyzing the trend data and the COVID data along with the Board of Health, and taking a look at where we stand. And as we know, in the state, the cases are going up, and there's a lot of concerns out there, you know, with the COVID cases. But we have a pretty good medical team that's helping us, giving us some advice around this. Mayor Holliday?
I just wanted to add that I received a text from our health department because they notified me. We have 10 active cases, 2 who will be stepping out of isolation in 2 days, but that's a significant increase from, you know, where we have been, you know, over the last many months. So, I mean, clearly we're starting to see trends upward, but that's still only 10. It's manageable, but
including the school cases.
I think 2 are school cases.
But so, I mean, but the 10 is a total of everybody in the city?
Yes.
Okay.
And it's only city residents.
Right.
Like, we had a restaurant that had to close for a couple days to deep clean, but the staff person there who worked outside tested positive as a result of her boyfriend and lives in Newbury. But these are still all the cases we have to contract trace. And so this is what's taking a tremendous amount of time. And so we have spoken over the weekend, and we're going to be adding more support to nursing staff to get them, if you will, sort of deputized or authorized by the Board of Health on the weekends, because it's hard sometimes for a school nurse from, say, the Bresnahan to reach out to, you know, a family member and talk about a sporting activity they did in New Hampshire, when it's like, well, what are you calling me for? Who are you? You know, so we're trying to, you know, sort of raise the level of, you know, certification, if you will, from our Board of Health department, so that we have more support to help with the contract tracing.
Right, and that's the challenge, especially the outside. I mean, you have travel teams, you have regional teams, you have student athletes out there playing with other student athletes from other towns, other communities on weekends, and it's just, you know, it's something that I think will probably message out to our district. I think it's really important for people to understand that even within our own league, we're minimizing travel. So a high school schedule, for example, or a middle school schedule, you may have non-league opponents that you play. But right now, as the athletic directors are looking at options, really keeping it within each league. So you're not going to go, last year, for example, we played Beverly in basketball, so we're not going to be doing that. We're just going to stay in the Cape Ann League. But it's hard to monitor the outside activities.
But I think the other thing that's really important, and we should commend our families, is because they're making the calls.
Yes.
Because we wouldn't have known about,
Correct.
Somebody testing positive in Amesbury who played with their kid, or we
Correct.
wouldn't have known about some classes in Danvers that the
Right.
coach was testing positive if the mother didn't call.
Correct.
So parents, thank you, and
Yes.
please continue to do that.
Because the more, like, and this is why this is important. I mean, as we're contact tracing, this type of information assists us to keep our schools open. Because if we didn't, as you said, Mayor, for parents notifying us of outside of Newburyport, of an outside activity, that's been beneficial, because then we can go through our system over the weekend and make sure we can keep our schools open. But I think it really has to be a community effort for all of us.
Questions? Mr. Callahan?
I have several, so I'll get them out all in one go. Are the staff, do we have an opportunity or plan to test staff, like on a weekly or regular basis in any way?
So right now, in Newburyport, and this is, I want to credit Kathy Riccio and the planning, we have tests optional. So if we have a staff member that's concerned or a close contact, we can send them out to get tested free of charge. I know as part of my superintendent's report, the commissioner's last update, and almost going back to what Mr. Allard talked about, is the antigen testing from the federal government. The school systems, well, the DESE, are going to be receiving, I think, 1 million tests. And how they're going to distribute them, I'm not sure, or when they're coming in, I'm not sure. But the commissioner did say to the superintendents that's on its way. And I think, as Mike Allard said, if we could get testing, almost like that home kit testing, that's a game changer, I think, for the school systems. So right now we have testing for teachers if they're a close contact, or if they're really concerned that they came in close contact, and they work with Kathy Riccio and the nurses to do that testing.
And just to jump in just for a second, Brian, we are referring students to where they and their parents can go to get testing.
Correct. So it's not only the contact tracing for our families, but our nurses follow up with the families and assist them throughout. And I'll just, we'll talk a little bit maybe about food service, but for example, Pam Keeley in the food service department are delivering meals to all of those families to their houses every day. So that's above and beyond of what we do here in Newburyport. But so as part of, I think, what we do is not only we just doing the contact tracing, we work with the families throughout the quarantine. Some families are being quarantined out of precaution and feel they don't need to be tested because they're going to weigh out the 14 days. Other families are concerned for other family members and work with our people to get tested.
So that's part of my second question. So there's no requirement for the person who was close contact to be tested at all. They just have to go home for 2 weeks. They're not required to be
Correct.
tested.
If they're symptom-free, it's up to the families. But if they're symptom-free and you're quarantined out of precaution and you stay symptom-free for the 14 days, you don't necessarily have to be tested. But
even though there's that whole asymptomatic spreader
well,
concern?
some families choose to get tested, but it's, if you were potentially exposed and you're waiting out the 14 days, even if you had if you had the virus but you were asymptomatic, you have that 2-week period that you would no longer be considered contagious.
Are we also monitoring people with siblings so that the close contact kid goes home
Correct.
asymptomatic? Are we now saying they have, a brother So when that brother is coming to school, are we keeping dibs on that kid, knowing that the contact
That's where,
person-
when you have multiple siblings, that's where the families will get tested, because for, you know, the parents and other siblings in the house, they
But they're
want to
not
make
required
sure.
to by the district.
No, we're not requiring.
Okay, which brings me to my third part of the question. The kids who have been in quarantine, that, what was that number? 80 something, 68, 86?
Yep, I think
68.
68.
Currently in quarantine. Total, I think.
Currently or
89.
total?
Right now, I think we're currently at 68 district-wide.
Right.
I mean, that's basically the total because it's only been open for a couple weeks, right?
Correct.
Buildings. Okay.
So we had the exposure last week, so.
Okay, so do we know if any of the people that have gone home from quarantine, have any of them called us and said, we came out positive?
In some scenarios, this scenario, no, but in some scenarios, we've had.
Well, so I guess that means the total positive cases, does that include kids who were contact of the actual positive case and turned out they were also positive?
We have, like, for example, we have the outside activities where you have had, let's say, two members that are positive, but you're quarantining, let's say, the other 30 that may have played on that team that are being quarantined right now. We've had maybe a positive case there.
And is that number in the numbers of cases?
All the positive cases that are up there, correct.
Okay.
But we do have, remember, as Mayor Holliday said, we do have staff that may have tested positive but do not live in Newburyport, so that wouldn't count against the Newburyport cases. So if I lived in Ipswich and I was teaching here, for example, and I tested positive, my data would go to the Ipswich
I mean, I think
and
that's a
not
problem
Newburyport.
statewide. I brought that up to, every time we talked about this, you know.
Well, and that's why I think as we're looking at our metrics and we're working with our medical professionals, that's what we take in consideration, because you could have, you know, right now we don't, but let's say if we had 4 or 5 cases, let's say among staff members, that may not live in Newburyport, but that would have an impact on the school system.
Right,
for
and it
example.
goes to the whole color coding thing that parent talked about. You know, Newbury could be yellow, but the people are really here every day.
Correct. Or you could be, yes, you know, as Dr. Sue, we'll leave that interpretation, and they'll work with our data and give us advice on how to move. And then our job is, we're operational, so whatever information they give us on the medical side, we can make it happen. We can bring more students in, we can bring more students out, we can stay status quo. But it gets very complex that we're, you know, that we're figuring out as we're in the moment, you know. But I just, you know, I want to credit, I think, our district with the health and safety protocols, with the teacher testing, with our medical professionals assisting us. I think we're in pretty good shape compared to some others. And knock on wood, we haven't had to shut down a school yet, because I think all the work with the contact tracing.
Additional questions for the superintendent? You can take.
Move my chair.
Terrific.
I have like 4 more agenda items next, so.
The next item on the agenda is the permission form for fundraisers, and talking about that, both David Hockheiser and I am here. And I think, David, if you could just talk a little bit about the sort of the principles behind putting together the fundraising sheet, we can then talk about that, if you don't mind.
Sure. Policy has been talking about this for a couple months now. I think since the spring, when we had the booster-thon, people come in and talk to us as a committee. And one of the things we realized is that all of the schools and the sporting programs have different processes for moving through fundraising, and we wanted to streamline that. So the superintendent's been working with the leadership team to come up with a common form. On that the common forum is going to include a lot of the goals and a lot of the transparency goals and I guess values that the policy team has been talking about, making sure that the purpose and the people involved, like whether it involves class time or not, and a host of other factors, are all going to be accounted for. And we've been talking about people who want to do fundraising in the schools. They would have a couple times during the year to apply. The principals would then send information to the finance subcommittee, who would then, take a look at the aggregate of what's being raised and why it's being raised, both to make sure that things are, again, all aligned with the interests and values of our, the district, and also to see if there are anything being funded with fundraisers that shouldn't be included in a budget instead. And then it would move forward through the superintendent's permission. So I think the forum is a great first step in getting sort of a unified approach to people who want to do fundraising and the reasons for doing fundraising and the sort of things being asked of our students and families.
Yeah, it's been a pretty decentralized process for about the last 10 years, and I think centralizing it is really helpful. Sean, if you had more that you wanted to add.
Yes, as we were looking in the fundraising, as Mr. Hawkeyes has said, each school, each organization was doing a little bit different. So we looked at a few different districts and created one form that really, I think, articulated the information that we're looking for fundraising. Obviously, the proposed fundraiser activity, you have that in your packet. The dates of the fundraiser, anticipated revenue, what's the purpose for the funds, and then a procedure to be established of handling the funds and expenditures throughout. It would be signed by the organizational rep, the principal, the designee, or superintendent designee for approval. And then up top on the form, because most of the organizations, we're probably going to know the name and who they are. But we also had, is it a school-related parent organization? Is it a school-sponsored group, club, or team? And is it a school-sponsored activity involving students in fundraising projects? So we have those check boxes also. And then the other piece that we added through working with the policy committee is a summary at the end of each fundraiser and of what was generated. And I think this is as Mr. Hawkeye said, the first step in collecting information regarding the fundraising throughout the district. And then to allow Mr. Cole and the FinCom committee to see, as part of that fundraising would go through FinCom, so the school committee would be aware of the fundraising that is going on, and then also that tally sheet when the fundraising's over would also go through FinCom. And it's just for the parents and the organizations. We're extremely grateful for everyone fundraising for the schools. I mean, this is probably the most school system being supported by the community. In all of my years of working in other districts, this by far is the most supportive community to the schools. It just gives us an idea throughout the school year. So we're not duplicating efforts, and we can kind of, as Mr. Hawkeye just said, as we're developing budget, are these enhancement activities or are they replacing things that we might be able to add into the budget? So for us, I think it's a good first step, and we'd like to utilize this form or pilot this form as soon as possible with the fundraisers that may be coming up.
Yeah, I know that I certainly for years have been asking for us to somehow wrap our arms around the funds that are being raised in the outside community and what they're going to, because for all intents and purposes, if we need those funds being raised to do the things we're doing, then those really are part of the expenses of operating a school system. And we want to get as accurate a look at that as we possibly can. So I think that this is really very good work, and I'm glad it's starting. Other thoughts? Mr. Callahan?
I have a couple question and things I'd like to see added or to it. When we talk about the vendor, kind of the school-sponsored activity involving students and fundraising projects via sales, I know Boochathon was the big one, but things like, the PTO does like the wreath sales and wrapping paper and all those. I mean, the parents are selling that stuff really, but would the PTO be required to give us the information from the wreath company, for example? It wouldn't just be, this is the PTO as an umbrella. So we'd have to know it's, Wreath Company USA and.
Right, and that's what, right here.
That's going to be, that wrapping is going to be coming up, I imagine, from the PTO any minute, right? They usually do the wrapping paper starting after Halloween. So that's that one. Yeah. And then.
Just so you know, on that point, one of the things we talked about in the policy, which I think we're going to try to read at the next meeting. So we have a policy meeting coming up. Did we say next week? I forget the date.
Yeah, I don't have my calendar.
Policy meeting coming up, and then when we eventually go to present the new policy, part of it was kind of disclosure about the profit margins and for whom.
Oh, that's one of the things. That's what I was going to say. That it's not on there.
Okay.
I think it should be on there.
Yeah.
And I think that we should also, talk about what is our ceiling. What are we willing to give to allow these companies to take? I don't want to keep going on the Boochathon. That was like 40% or some very large number of the sales was going to that organization. So, and I know people will say these organizations charge at least 35%, whatever it is, but that doesn't make it right. So at the very least, the people being asked to donate or sell should be told by whatever organization is doing the fundraiser, just so you know, X amount goes to overhead. I don't think it should be kind of this blind thing. Can we get on here, the time frame from the date of the permission request to the response from the district will be within X days? Whatever you guys think it is, a week, 2 weeks, whatever that happens to be.
I think we had a minimum, like on the back, I thought we put 2 weeks, a minimum of 2 weeks.
That's a 2 weeks of me asking you, but to get a response from the district, it should be within, it can't go on for a month waiting for an answer.
No.
So whatever that number is, I think that should be in there too.
Correct.
The district will respond within X days.
Correct. Because there are going to be some scenarios where, a fundraiser may have to happen quick that wasn't planned. Like, for example, if DECA students go to the States and let's say they qualify for the Nationals. So that wasn't really anticipated. So those students might fill out a fundraising form to get support. So I think what we put on is a minimum of 2 weeks before the fundraiser. So this
yeah, that's fine. I'm
done.
more concerned about the response from the district to the organization.
Yeah.
How long that is. And I always anticipate they're going to go to the Nationals. I don't know what you're. So that brings up timing. I know that sometimes the idea will come up at the end of the school year like for fall sports. To like, hey, let's get this ramped up over the summertime. So would central office, the principals won't really be around. So if something's requires the principal and you to sign it, that will be able to occur in July.
Correct. So that's why we have the designee.
Okay.
And we had talked about applications coming in July 15th and December 15th. So if you wanted to do something for the fall, it would be, you would put that in over the summer.
Okay.
And if I may enter into what I'm also, there's probably fundraising that's been going on, like that are for years, like golf tournaments and things like that. So I think we have the form here as we're going to collect that, but I think those annual fundraising that we can also get information to the school committee, that these are the ones that have been going on annually.
Yep.
And then,
And I guess the last thing, this is really from Ms. Lysick, 'cause she's here, right?
yes.
Nancy Lysick here? Oh, okay. I would like to see once, we get these things, so we get the reports, and we're gonna be talking about it tomorrow in finance. It's such a generic line item, fundraising, but those should be, I'd love to see them broken out. Fundraising was for Wreaths, golf tournament, ABC, with the numbers, because, looking at a spreadsheet that's just one giant number doesn't really tell you anything. It tells the finance department, but school committee looks at a number that's several $100,000 and you don't know what it is. So I'd like to see whatever that report ends up being for all these things that we, I guess, vote on. That's how it is reported out to us.
And that's from the discussions with finance. If it goes through finance committee, because they're meeting monthly, we'll start to get that total of, what was raised. You'll have that breakdown, and then
Right.
we can compile that for the end of the year.
Okay.
Other comments, questions?
I just want to say I love the idea of a form. It takes the onus off of the principal and you to have to collect all this information. It's automatic and it will become routine. So I think it's a great idea.
Thank you.
So as this came out of policy, are you looking for 2 meetings, or can we approve this tonight?
Well, we set the next policy meeting. Sorry, I can't open the phone with my mask on. We set the next policy meeting for November 10th to Tuesday. So I think that was in anticipation of being able to present the policy at November 16th meeting. Right, that would be the first read. And then, looks like December 7th would be the approval. Right,
We
that's
could,
the process.
but we're not going to be voting on the form. The form would be part of the policy, per se.
The form would be part of the
So we
policy.
could, there's no reason you can't pilot it now, that I can think of.
No, you could try the form. I think part of the other thing we ran into with regards to presenting the policy is there were like 4 or 5 different policies in the policy book about fundraising, some of which have language that overlaps and some of it is a little unclear. So we wanted to go back into that and not just present a new policy, but clean the whole thing up. I did just get one version of the policy documents from Nick, sent a Google Doc folder just today. I'm gonna have to take a look at that, and
Okay.
to his own admission, it's a little squirrely. So, and it's in Google, so I don't really know. I think that's a whole other conversation we need to have, but, and then we were gonna talk about how to, like, what language overlaps and
Right.
what we can get rid of and what needs to stay, and maybe just consolidate them all next to one another.
Yep.
Because they're not even on consecutive pages in the book.
Right.
They're like a little here, a little there.
Yep.
So we'll do that at the 10th and then be ready to present on the 16th.
So are we saying you can pile the form now, we don't have to vote on its content?
I don't, no, I mean.
Because I
think
really
we-
want
we
that
need to-
percentage of profit in the form.
Yes, I'll make the modifications to that on the form. We
Okay.
can at least start to, we pilot this form and we can start collecting what's going on out there. And then as the form is filled out and we're looking at it, if we need to make more modifications, we can. But I will add that on the form.
Okay.
Terrific. The next item on the agenda is a conversation, an informed conversation about the strategic plan. And I know that, Sean, you've been doing a bunch of thinking about this and have some thoughts you want to share with us.
So, as we all know, we're in our last year of our 5-year strategic plan. As from spring of last year, we did lose some momentum, but I think, as a district, we've accomplished a lot, and that strategic plan really assisted me, I think, as part of my entry plan, but also part of the district needs. So I felt the strategic plan was very beneficial for me. What I plan on doing is I'll work with our leadership team, and I almost want to take the same approach that we utilized for the My Entry plan, is complete a detailed report for the school committee in the next couple of months. Present that report, do the highlights through a PowerPoint of kind of where we're at, what we've accomplished in the 5 years, what areas we still need to enhance. And I think phase 2, I envision of in the spring, utilizing our ELTs and our extended leadership team members as co-chairs, but also fill in the different areas and the different strategies for stakeholders throughout the community. And then start, we'll have the full report, we'll have the summary, and then we'll start to plan on the next 5-year strategic plan. And I think utilizing a lot of those areas, we may condense some areas if the phase 2 aspect of that, but I think a lot of these areas and the strategies, titles, I think are excellent. So that's kind of my thought process on that. Compile the data for the last 5 years, regroup with a strategic plan committee in each one of those subcategories, work throughout the spring and the summer, and then present a new strategic plan in September of 2021 for approval to the school committee. So as you all know, that's a long process. I received a lot of feedback in my reentry plan regarding the strategic planning. And people gave me a lot of information on what went well and what areas we could improve on. So I also utilized my entry plan to formulate the new strategic plan.
And some of your holiday.
I just would like to ask that having, this will be my 4th strategic plan. And the one thing that has not worked at all is the book that comes out after months and months of people sitting together, and then it just sits up on a shelf and collects dust after all that work. And if we decide to do something that's a little more robust than a trifold, okay, but I just would like to strongly emphasize that it come out in a similar format, because I think that was widely promulgated, and a lot of people knew a lot of the things we were working on, whether it would be general goals or whatever. But as opposed to a multiple 100-page 3-ring notebook.
Right.
Thank you.
You'll get the Cliff Notes.
Yes.
Yeah, and some of the school improvement plans have also really begun referencing the strategic plan as well. So it's kind of peppered in.
And the district goals.
Yeah.
And the superintendent goals.
Yeah.
Yeah, it all comes together.
It does all come together. So I think that, there's definitely been some momentum, certainly, since you've arrived. And I'm really interested in seeing what your team thinks we've done and what is left undone and which way we're going to turn. Other thoughts, comments, feedback? Mr. Cole?
Yeah, thanks. I guess I like what you've suggested in terms of compiling data, regrouping, meeting during the spring and summer. One of the things I just want to emphasize, I think it's important to take a look at how the environment's changed. I mean, and not just talking about the pandemic, but that's going to be a big piece of this. Because I recall from the last process, we had a number of different voices involved in bringing the strategic plan together, and I'm a big believer in getting those voices back to the table. I don't know if that's going to be able to get done, but I think virtually you might actually have a great opportunity to hear from people. But again, in terms of compiling data, I think it's also important to compile or take a look at how the environment's changed. And again, not just the pandemic, just, a lot of things. And the pandemic is going to overshadow a lot of things. But I think that we need to take a look at, some of the emphasis, for instance, in social emotional learning and maybe how that's, I'm just using this as an example, how that's, if you will, kind of taken a hit, or how it's become more pronounced in its importance. We heard about the mayor mentioning about, and we've seen the email about concern of a parent about their student being isolated or sedentary. So I just think I think it's important to take a look at, again, changes that we didn't anticipate when we first put this plan together and how things are today. And just to go along with what else you're compiling.
Thank you. Mr. Huckeiser.
I mean, I don't know how specific we want to get tonight about this, but I like a lot of what we've been talking about. I remember being on the committees last time, and one thing we talked about is a lot of the ideas that came up were nice, but they were sort of theoretical. And I think we could use things like in the moment student data. I think we could use the report we got from DESE last year to talk about what's going on in the schools. I think if we started by asking some questions, we could base our work on known student needs and faculty needs, as opposed to just some sort of, I don't know what to call them, dreams we have about education.
Yeah.
And I think that would help make the work we do more operationalized better, I guess I'll say. Like, instead of sitting up on the shelf,
Yep.
like if we know, hey, this is what we need, this is what we're going to do, then it starts rolling instead of goes over to the shelf, because it's not really realistic anyway. I think a lot about what the discussion we had, I think starting last year with the joint meeting with City Council, which, by the way, while that's on my mind, are we doing that this year? We usually do those in November.
I know.
Okay.
Finish your thought, I'll
Yeah.
answer.
But we talked about, like, if we have a 5-year strategic plan, what does years 1, 2, 3, and 4 look like with regards to yearly goals based on a big thing, and how do we then turn that, or recognize at least the budgetary needs in those in each year? Two last things. One is, I don't know if you were planning on doing this too, but we had a consultant come and help drive the process last year. And I remember the people leading my group, which was Reinventing Teaching and Learning, felt that the process we were given really constricted the document that came out of our conversation. And by the time it came to give them the document they asked for, it did not reflect the conversations we were having in the room. Because the box that the consultants wanted us to use didn't fit the conversation we were having. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't mind having a consultant if you think that's the way to go, but I think we need to be careful on how structured it is.
I mean, I haven't gone into, I've developed strategic plans in some of my previous districts, and although consultants I think are maybe important, maybe to give an overview, I think this work really needs to be done with the community and not a consultant. I think consultants can help you organize, but I would agree. I think when you work together as a community, everyone takes ownership of the work, and I agree. And I think the plans need to be actionable, and it should be living. I 100% agree with Mayor Holliday. You don't go through a strategic plan just to to check the box and said we did a strategic plan. It needs to be a living document. That's my game plan for now, being part of the new strategic planning. You know, I think it's going to look a lot different, hopefully feel a lot different.
Just one more thing.
Sure.
I think it's really important that we find a way to really get people's voice and to use it. I think there were a lot of people who felt, for example, coming out of the task force this summer, I think a lot of people felt that they went to those meetings and were never heard. I remember when we had all the meetings about the later start times, people kept saying we weren't really listening. And I know that the group of people starting the last strategic plan was about 2 to 3 times the size as the group that ended. And usually a lot of that has to do with, do people feel as if the time they're spending is commensurate to the, you know, the value that we have for their ideas and their voice. So I think, you know, to what Steve was saying, getting people to the table, getting the right people to the table is going to be a function of convincing them that we're here to listen, and then holding ourselves accountable to making sure that we're listening, and both keeping the document off the shelf and making sure that it's a collective opinion that drives the document.
Yeah, I agree. In the conversations that I've had with Sean, both about the history of the strategic plan and, you know, ideas about moving forward, I have also not recommended bringing in a consultant. I think that one of the things that's going to make this process dramatically different than the prior process is we've got 5 years of trying to do stuff that we said we wanted to do, that we have as a basis. We can evaluate what's been successful, what hasn't been successful, what do we need to do. You know, so there's something of a framework of how we want to approach this that we can already report out on and determine what worked and what didn't work. I agree with you. Mayor Holliday.
Think about the NEOSC team for our accreditation that came together. This was all done by internal staff who put all the work together and organized it, you know, over the multiple weeks, days they were here, I forget, and all the interviews that they did. So I think we certainly have the capability in-house to be able to, you know, organize something like this and, you know, be able to assign it to, you know, at least someone who can help coordinate schedule and, you know, all the kinds of things that have to happen, because it's it's an amazing amount of work, as you know, in terms of hours.
Thank you. Other feedback for Sean? Great. Terrific. Next item on the agenda is, as part of our sort of overall review of how we do our business, we're going to be looking at the documents, the operating norms, the Mass Code of Ethics, and our principles that we sign off on at the beginning of the year, and it seems worthwhile to sort of have a conversation about them over the next several meetings and see what is working and what isn't working, and what some of these ideas mean to us in action, what they look like. So everybody has gotten, over the last couple of meetings, the Mass Association of School Committees Code of Ethics, which again is something that we sign off on traditionally at our organizational meeting. And I wanted to go over that to get a sense from people about what they think is applicable, what isn't applicable, and what some of these things mean. So, you know, we can go over it point by point. You know, I'll certainly start by talking about Mass Association of School Committees has been in existence for a very long time. They've got a lot of history about not only providing support for school committees for everything from self-evaluations to hiring to developing codes of ethics. So this code of ethics, to me, seems
pretty similar to ones that Steve and I have signed 10, 15 years ago. It hasn't changed a lot, which to me says that it either is really functional or that it just gets the job done. The Code of Ethics delineates 3 areas of responsibility for the school committee. One is our community responsibility, a responsibility to the school administration, and our relationship to one another, and breaks out what our ethical responsibilities are in each of those areas. For the school committee member in relation to the community, it asks us to realize that his and her primary responsibility is to the children. Does anybody have any comments or thoughts about that, about what it might mean? Is it something we're comfortable with?
Yes.
Signing off on?
Yes.
Any other thoughts? Okay. Remember that his or her basic function is to the policymaking and not administrative. We've had robust conversations for some time about the role of school committee in the day-to-day operation of the schools, and this pretty clearly talks about us as creating policies that allow the district to function administratively without getting involved in the day-to-day. Any other thoughts about that? I think this is one that has been challenging to us. Remember that he and she is one of a team, and that we must abide by and carry out all committee decisions once they are made. And that has always been, for me, the ban on saying "I told you so." That once we make a decision, the decision is made, and whether it's a 7-0 decision or a 4-3 decision, the decision is made, and our actions should be in support of implementing that decision. That's a really interesting sound. And that was not from me, that sound. I think that sometimes can be really challenging, especially given the level of passion that we feel about some of the issues that are presented with us. But I have always interpreted that as, once the vote is done, we move forward as a committee. The committee's made its mind up, made its decision up, and whether that's a budget decision, whether it's a decision about a policy. Anybody have any thoughts about this? Steve, you've obviously been around quite a while. I mean, what are your thoughts about that?
I mean, I think it's just one of those things that we have to, do a good job of holding ourselves accountable, and just, if practice makes perfect, is close to where we want to be. I think we want to do business in a certain way, and I think it's important to, come to an understanding and follow things like what MASC has brought out, and tweak what we need to tweak, that recognizes the, if you will, the chemistry of the elected body we have here.
Thank you. Any other thoughts? Be well informed concerning the duties of a committee member on both local and state level. That's fairly self-explanatory. Mayor Holliday.
Do we have posted anywhere the roles and responsibilities of a school committee member? Is it on our website? I think it was at one point.
On the website?
Yeah, we should make sure.
Put it up there.
Yeah, I think that people are really confused in general about, they think that we do, we're sort of like city councilors, or you are, in terms of constituent service, parent service. That's not what we do. I think it's really important that we identify, what is the role of a school committee member in terms of our obligation to the superintendent.
There's a general definition. MASC sends out a yearly calendar, and in that little calendar, it talks all about that general responsibility.
We should lift that, yeah, and put it on the...
Is that on our Facebook page? That would be an important thing to put up there.
Yeah, I think...
don't know if it is or not.
Yeah, you can probably find it on the MASC website, too.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure, yeah, no, I think that we should put it on our website, and if it goes on the Facebook website, that might be very, very helpful. this one I think has been challenging, and it's remember that he or she represents the entire community at all times. And that is one that has been often very challenging to me, that sometimes we get presented issues that are very, very compelling, but don't impact a lot of the kids, and we have to sort of find that balance. I don't know any other way to say this, but I'm certainly open to hearing some, but we do represent the entire community. And the way that I've often thought this through is that we have 2,200 kids in the district, and if we are asked to make a decision that constructively impacts 1,200 of those kids and, may not have that constructive impact on 1,000, we represent the whole community, the greatest number of kids. And that's what we have to sort of focus on, what's going to work for the whole district. But I agree that this one is really a challenge. I've been involved in so many compelling situations that affect a single child or 2 or 3 students, and it can be really, really hard.
There's also exceptions, such as special populations.
Right. Absolutely.
Well, and sometimes it doesn't hold out either. Like when we were discussing school start times, right? The parents of Bresnahan students, a number of them at least, felt that changing the start times for the district was not in their best interest.
Mm-hmm.
And regardless of the fact that we reminded them that their children will soon be older,
Mm-hmm.
and that there was no compelling evidence to not change at the time.
Right.
So sometimes I think our search for equality can crush any forward motion on things that it doesn't have to be. It doesn't always have to serve everybody, as long as there's a compelling reason why it should serve somebody. And if it's doing no harm, objectively speaking. So I think we have to, that's an interpretation piece that we have to be careful of.
Yes, and that to me has always been an example of the benefits really do outweigh the inconveniences. The later start, it was never a doubt for me that that's the direction that we should move in, even though there was lots of controversy around it. That to me was representing the entire community, even if there were some parents who, through a lack of familiarity with it or just not understanding the ideas, weren't ready to hear it. It still was, again, it's something that I think that that Sean helped us accomplish. So yes, I agree. Accept the office as a committee member as a means of unselfish service with no intent to play politics in any sense of the word or to benefit personally from his or her committee activities. I have to say that in all of the years I've been on the school committee, certainly the latter half of that, people personally benefiting, I've never seen even a hint of that among school committee members, that people just are not parlaying this into something else that is
the big bucks.
It shouldn't be.
The big bucks.
Into big bucks.
Can we go back to C just for a minute? When you were saying it, I was looking for something I knew I'd read on the MASC website, and I found it, which may be just updated version of that. School committee members agree to thoughtfully seek and support solutions that will provide the greatest benefit to students. Once the school committee has taken action, committee members will support the official position of the school committee, which is similar, right?
I'm perfectly happy with substituting that.
Well, but then there's a little note at the bottom. Some individuals object to this provision because it stifles dissent and disagreement. It is important to note that supporting the official position of the school committee does not preclude principled disagreement or future attempts to change policy, but simply not to undermine the work of the majority's policy of the district.
Good.
So I was going to wonder, and we can continue to go through this one thing point by point, because the MASC, this is from 2012, which is still fairly old, but I think more recent than what we've been signing. Their norms and protocols revised in 2012 has a whole lot of this, as well as like norms of operation and stuff in one document. Because I know the thing we're going over now is normally like 3 or 4 different things we sign, right?
Right.
So I don't know, and once we go through this, that's fine. If I can send this along, or anybody can go look at it on the MASC site, it may be good for us to look at this.
Well, if there's an update.
Maybe to change it or adopt it entirely. It just seems more updated, I think.
Yeah, I think.
But anyway, so that was what I was looking for that the whole time. So.
I think when I started 20 years ago, this used to have like a wax seal at the bottom of it. So it would be really good to be looking, if they've updated it, it would be really good to be working with that document. So maybe we ought to shift that conversation till the next meeting.
Okay.
And if you can distribute that to everybody.
Yep.
I think it'll be a good conversation. It'll be nice to see what the changes are. I definitely like the language that you just read better than the language that's here.
Okay.
So why don't we hold off on that? Does that seem reasonable? Great. Registration for the MASC business meeting. I know, Sheila, that you are going.
Yes, I registered, and Steve is going to also.
Steve is going as well.
Alternate, yeah.
Okay, terrific. Good. Happy that you guys are going. We have the resolutions to talk through before we go to superintendent's evaluation. So if we can just move through those and give our delegates some instructions. Resolution 1 is MCAS and high-stakes testing. I wish they had sort of like a cliff notes for this.
Right.
We'll just go to therefore be it resolved.
Yeah,
I think you just drop down to the last paragraph, really.
Yeah, that's what we're doing.
You know, given everything that's, again, we're going through pandemic, equity, I think it just makes a lot of sense to continue the moratorium on high-stakes testing.
Yeah. Does anybody have another perspective on it?
I mean, I'll just say, unfortunately, it also speaks to the reason why supporters of testing support testing, whereas in a place like Newburyport, we'll likely be fine without the MCAS results. There are districts for whom the MCAS results are a huge motivator to make sure they're getting curriculum correct and that they're actually addressing the needs of subgroups. So we have to realize that, you know, our privilege is showing when we're talking about doing away with standardized testing.
In those districts, are there conversations happening that you're aware of, Dave, in those districts?
I'm sorry, I couldn't.
Are there conversations happening in those districts about alternatives to standardized testing to generate that information that's important to students?
I've had a few, but you know, I'm not at the right table sometimes. So I'm just saying, just in general, we should know that one of the foundations of No Child Left Behind and standardized testing in general is to make sure that subgroups are the needs of subgroups and the opportunity gaps are being addressed. And if you do away with all of those tests without replacing it in any significant manner, places could easily go back to the Wild West of, I'm going to teach what I teach and if I want to teach, and the accountability factor, which doesn't affect us as much as it does other people, can slip away. So I would like, with regards to, thinking about all constituents, MASC seems to be using a rather blunt object to talk about this.
I agree with Dave's statement. I was curious, when we vote on these, are we looking at this through the lens of what's best for our district, or are we voting for the whole state, when we support these resolutions?
That's an interesting question, Mr. Cole.
Yeah, you basically vote for your district, because you're going to have, and I've never done a virtual one, but I've sat in on the in-person voting, and you're basically going to have anywhere from, you have to have a quorum, okay? So there's usually well over 100 people, closer to 200 people. And the resolution will get brought up, and then people will be invited to speak and basically make a case for each one of the districts. So there probably will be some talk about looking at subgroups and accountability. And there may, you know, so there's going to be all kind of discussion. And then basically when the discussion is closed, basically take a in-person, you know, they go row by row and you raise your hand and they count up the votes and, you know, decide whether the resolution passes or not. So it's really about, you know, speaking for your district. And again, the other thing you do, and I don't know who sponsored this, but generally they show, okay, submitted by MASC Board of Directors. So the fact that it's being submitted by the whole Board of Directors doesn't mean it's coming from like one school district, because sometimes the resolutions, and I'm just scrolling down here, the resolutions come from a school district, but none of these 10 resolutions come from any school districts. For example, the last meeting that I attended, there were 3 or 4 resolutions coming from the Framingham Public Schools.
Yeah.
So
They seem to generate a lot of resolutions, Framingham.
well, it's because the MASC president was from Framingham, so Framingham School Committee.
I also just want to say that I don't think the MCAS is achieving its goal. So it might get us to talk about it, but it's not doing the good that it's supposed to be doing. And I think right now, if we were to continue giving MCAS exams as graduation requirements, it's going to do more harm than good, because kids have missed tons of curriculum, because we know that remote learning, which is disproportionately affecting certain places than others, is also being exacerbated by the digital divide and access to Wi-Fi and devices and all that sort of thing. So I envision nothing but a hot mess if graduation rates continue to be tied to MCAS while the pandemic generation is still in high school.
Can I, short of amending this, can I make a suggestion that we vote this either up or down? If we voted up, that if you could prepare, Dave, just a paragraph that explained the concerns that you talked about with subgroups, pass that on to Sheila and Steve. In part of the conversation, they can raise that issue.
Okay.
Does that seem like a reasonable way to?
Yeah.
Okay, so why don't we vote this one up or down? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? We're sending you guys with instructions to pass this, but again, there's an interesting conversation to have about the issue that Dave raised. Thank you.
Bruce, did you say you abstained?
No, I didn't. I said no.
Oh, you're
abstains.
asking if everybody abstains.
Yeah, no abstains. COVID-19 state funding. Therefore, be it resolved that, let's see. Therefore, be it resolved that the state must guarantee every school district full reimbursement for whatever COVID-19 expenses are required to follow state mandates. There can be no unfunded mandates. I'm really wrestling with this one.
Yeah, I know, geez.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? That one didn't take a lot of discussion. The school committee anti-racism resolution, which we have seen. Do we need to continue to discuss this, or can we vote on this?
We can vote.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And no abstentions. This is an interesting one, lowering the voting age for municipal elections. And therefore be it resolved that the sponsors call upon the Mass Legislature to pass the Empower Act and take other means necessary to allow cities and towns to establish a minimum voting age of 16 years for all municipal elections. I'm open to conversation.
I like it. I agree with everything they said. I think kids who are 16 are expected to have many responsibilities, but not have any part of electing the people like us. some of our high school students in particular, way smarter than I could have ever hoped to have been in 12th grade, and they should definitely have some voice in their community.
Thoughts? Other thoughts?
Agreed.
I see some heads nodding.
And it only says that municipalities can allow this. It doesn't,
Yeah.
it's not the state forcing them to do so.
I think it's great. It fosters civic engagement to allow them to vote at a younger age. Hopefully they'll keep voting.
Just one of the thoughts that I had, and I'm just asking the question, I wonder what kind of an impact that would have on the ability of a 16-year-old to, say, run for school committee or city council. If they can vote, would they be able to run for those offices?
Huh? What's the requirement now? Just 18? Like, we don't have a requirement like.
I don't think we do have.
Is there an age requirement for Senate or state rep?
I don't think, no, it's just for the federal offices.
Or at least 18 for. You have to be a legal adult, I guess, to run for office, right?
I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, who knows?
Somebody in the
Legal adult
civics-
means different things. You can't buy
Where's
beer
Mr.
till you're
Grafton's
21,
cell
but you can go to war. So.
You don't have to be emancipated at 18.
Right.
Yep. Additional thoughts, or Holiday?
I just wanted to repeat that Andy Vargas asked me if I would meet with the High School Youth Council last year about this Empower Act. And he got tied up, but Representative Kalkhorst came, and there were, I think, 18 or 19 students that we spoke with, and the majority voted against this because they said that most of the kids would be voting the way their parents told them to vote. And that they just, and I was really surprised at the outcome of that, council, but that doesn't mean that should influence our, decision. But I expected this to be, the opposite, like 18-2 in favor, and it was the opposite. So it surprised me. But
That is interesting.
I thought so too, especially given the amount of civics education that we do in our school district.
I would say that a lot of kids. I'm sorry,
Mr. Colson.
Yeah, sorry.
But civics education's not required in Massachusetts, is it?
In 8th grade.
It is required in 8th grade?
Requirement?
Now,
8th grade.
It is?
they passed legislation
How long
2 years ago.
2 years ago.
Because it used to be New Hampshire was like the only one in the area that required it.
2 years
We
ago.
never
they
stopped.
2 years ago?
mandated it.
Okay.
We never
All right.
stopped. I mean, our civics class at the high school, and now they have AP too. It's great.
Yeah.
So if civics education is taking place in 8th grade, do we want to look at a 14-year-old voting age?
I don't know. I'm been asked to be the Zoom guest lecturer on Wednesday in the 8th grade class, so I will ask them that question.
I'm not surprised that the kids voted against it. I'm surprised at the reason. Usually kids would vote against it because they don't trust their classmates. Serious. I've heard that many times. And I wouldn't want to burst their bubble, but I bet you most 20 and 25 and 30-year-olds vote the way their parents did.
Yeah. I was going to say, I bet a lot of 18-year-old kids who really, I mean, me, I wasn't like well versed in who ran then. George Bush the first, probably, right? It was probably my first election. I don't know. Although I knew I didn't agree with my parents about many things, so I voted against him anyway.
There's that.
Yeah, I certainly,
I think it continues well past 16, that behavior of doing what your parents talk about all day long.
That also sounds terribly akin to the anti-suffragette sentiment 100 years ago, that women would only vote the way their husbands vote, so let's not even bother with it. I mean, it's just, that whole
I
thinking
am really confident that from the ages of 12 up, my kids wouldn't vote the way I told them to vote. There just wouldn't be any chance of that.
I will also say that kids today, I mean, my kids aren't even all that informed, but they're much more informed, much more aware than I ever was as a student.
Media.
I mean, it's social media. We can poo-poo it all we want, but if they read more and hear more and are involved more in the discussions than ever before.
Okay, so lowering the voting age.
Yeah, I will say that I was ambivalent about this, but actually, I think I would vote for it now.
Should we take a vote?
Yeah,
Is this up or down as well?
yeah, up or down, yeah. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? None. Man, could have a whole different impact on how we campaign going forward. All right, number 5, supporting increased federal support and stimulus funding for public K-12 education. This seems kind of like...
Aye.
Right?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Wait.
Oh, okay.
Can I just ask a question
Sure.
here? We're on 5, right?
We're on 5.
Okay, so,
Supporting increased federal support.
But they tie it very sneakily into progressive tax legislation
Oh, did they?
at the very last sentence. So they slide some politics in there. I'm just saying, like, it's one thing to say,
I
let's
don't
just...
know what this means, though, where it says emerging about the pandemic, and then demanding an immediate overhaul of the instructional plans and strategies of school systems across the country. Does that mean as a result of the pandemic that there had to be, I mean, we're still trying to do what we do in our standards-based curriculum and teach that through different, that sentence bothers me.
the first one?
beginning.
Pandemic is a monument.
An immediate overhaul of the instructional plans and strategies of school systems across the country.
And we can only vote for the whole thing, not...
I know.
No, I'm asking. We can't...
We can make
move it.
We
amendments.
can make amendments.
Yeah.
Can we
I read that
vote
it's just
to make an
recon-
amendment, not at this meeting, but before the thing on this one, and hold off on this?
Yeah, I think they have
Particular question?
forms on the website to submit.
We do have one more, we do actually have one more meeting right before the, because it's been shifted. So we could hold off on this one and try to get some clarification on it. Dave, you were going to say something?
I was just saying, it reads to me as if all of a sudden we have to change everything we're used to doing, instructional plans and strategies.
And I don't agree with that.
But I'm more concerned about it supports the progressive
Right.
tax legislation, and not that I mind progressive tax legislations, but it's just interesting the way they kind of slid that in there as the funding method.
Well, we passed massive, changes to the school last year's Student Opportunities Act. Again, whether or not that fully gets funded over the 5 years that was promised based on what's going on, but, I'm not sure that progressive tax legislation is the...
Can I make a suggestion that we hold this off till next week, and that anybody who wants to take a crack at amending it or offering an amendment, just simply, we will consider that next week, at our next school committee meeting, what amendment we would offer. Does that seem reasonable? All right, so we will hold the vote on that till our next school committee meeting. Resolution 6 is retention of Medicaid revenue. Therefore, be it resolved that Mask urges the general court to require that 100% of Medicaid reimbursements to cities and towns be provided in full amount to the public schools of each municipality through a school district revolving account to underwrite the cost of providing an adequate education. What are we doing now?
Well, it was probably, was it 3 years ago, Nancy, when we were trying to balance the budget? And, then, so when I actually went into Boston and met with Lieutenant Governor and Sean Cronin from the Division Local Services Department of Revenue. And he said, well, what are you doing with your Medicaid money? And he went and looked it up and said, you get about $125,000 a year. And so I went back to Ethan and I said, I want that money to go to the schools. He said, what? That goes to the general fund. And then I said, I want it to go to the schools as another revenue source. So for the last, you'll notice in your revenue that it says Medicaid care as a revenue source. So it's now coming to the schools directly.
From here, but that's in Newburyport.
Right, but I'm just saying that's what we're doing,
Yes.
So I say yes.
All right.
Anybody have any other feedback? I'm glad that we're doing it. I do remember that transition. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? None. Attempts by the United States Department of Education to direct funding to private schools, taking on a national issue here. Therefore, be it resolved that Mass petitions the Attorney General of Massachusetts to review and recommend to the Executive Office of Education and the Mass Department of Elementary Education to review the formal language of such statutes and determine the distribution of federal funds to benefit economically disadvantaged students, and further that the Attorney General will provide legal guidance to state agencies in Massachusetts to implement such formulas based on the actual language and legislative intent of the statute, should that be in variance with any advisory issued by the United States Secretary of Education. I have a rough idea what this might be at, but does anybody else want to sort of share what they think the issue, the underlying issue they're trying to address
It's out of my league.
Yeah, I think my guess is that this is trying to address the last 4 years of the Department of Education at the federal level, funding private schools, charter schools, religious schools with federal money. It's my guess that that's what this is about. And basically, I think what they're saying is they want the state to review.
Distribution of funds under Title I.
They use the term advisory in parentheses. So I think they want to have the Attorney General review whether or not we have to comply with that mandate on a state level. That's what I think.
Can, since it seems like everybody is thinking that it may be something and it may actually not be that, can we postpone this one too?
Sure.
So we can find out?
See if we can get information, yep.
No idea.
8, membership of a school committee member on the Board of Elementary and Secondary Education. I think there are no current representatives on that state body, and this is a request that there be a school committee rep. I don't have a problem with it.
I would say yes.
Yes.
Any other feedback? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None. Resolution number 9, providing equity for sexual orientation, LGBTQ plus students, teachers, and staff. Whereas gender is not listed as a protected class in federal laws, may it be resolved that MASC file legislation and petition our federal legislative delegation to also file legislation which would have the effect of adding sexual orientation and gender identity to the list of protected classes in order to provide equity and support for our students, teachers, and staff. I don't have a problem with this one.
I just want to confirm that we say that Mass does recognize that protected class.
Yes.
Okay, I just didn't know if you'd said does not. I just want to confirm.
Yeah. Any other comments, thoughts? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. And number 10, relative to the monitoring of attendance of students during the pandemic. Therefore, be resolved that Mass advocate for legislation and regulation that protect the rights of parents to withhold their children from school for reasons of their health status or health risk, and further. It seems to me that they are asking the state to adopt a policy that we're already functionally doing here in Newburyport. That if parents don't feel like they can send their kids to school, we're providing an equitable, or trying to provide an equitable education for them.
Weren't all schools mandated to offer remote learning?
Yeah.
So, okay.
I think they just want to make sure that students and their families are not punished for making decisions about not sending kids into school. I mean, I don't really understand.
I think that we do that because we already discussed you work directly with families.
Right.
I mean, could there really be a district where they're just like, no, you're in trouble?
I think they're referring to the attendance requirement and accountability for this year. Because as we, as the commissioner has stated, attendance must be taken. But I think this is, if you look at the last two bullets, it's saying, because we're in the middle of a pandemic, that attendance should not be a accountability piece.
Is there funding tied to attendance, Sean?
Nancy, is there, I think?
There's funding tied to enrollment.
Funding is tied to enrollment.
But not attendance?
Not funding.
Okay.
Right.
But it might be an allocation of other resources?
The attendance goes to your time of learning and everything else.
Didn't,
I would probably recommend, you might want to get some more information on this one.
I was going to say the same thing, because I think it's important. I mean, that's been an important piece for us to relay to parents, that attendance is required by DESE, whether you're remote, in person, or, and by saying we want you to waive all those rules, what are we, I mean, we need to have some kind of accountability, and if we're doing away with the MCAS, I mean, granted, we'll be doing our own assessments, and I think our school district does a decent job with the assessments that we use, but I think that they should waive, if parents can present information regarding why, whatever, reason they couldn't, we look at all these people who are in quarantine, I mean, I think this is worded poorly, and I think we need more. I think we need more information.
It also sounds like they're trying to advocate for parents' choice, and that they're trying to say that there are districts holding parents far too accountable for making decisions to keep their kids out of school when they don't feel safe. And knowing that in all the surveys I saw over the summer, disproportionately lower socioeconomic people felt less safe sending their kids to school. And so I think, again, that plays into the way different things look in different towns.
Let's hold on this one till the next meeting. What I will do is I will contact MASC to get clarification on 6, 7, and 10. And we will then bring those up. And Mr. Hockheiser is going to write a paragraph to amend 6, I think, and offer
No, it was
that.
5.
Was it 5?
5,
Yeah.
7, and 10, yep.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next item on the agenda is the superintendent evaluation, and I will very briefly, and Mayor Holliday can feel free to jump in as well. The Superintendent Evaluation Committee met coincident with getting some guidance from DESE, which you have both got a hard copy of now and have gotten an email file of suggesting how we might focus administrative/superintendent evaluations on for this past year with the pandemic. The mayor and I took a look at this document of indicators and took a look at the evaluation form that we had been using. And essentially, the mayor has plugged in all of the values and factors here into the evaluation form and eliminated the other items that the state is saying, just focus on these. So what you have gotten tonight is a folder that's got the evaluation form in it. It's got the indicators in it, and it also, I believe, has district goals in it. And I think our recommendation as the evaluation committee is that we go ahead with the evaluation using the amended form, using the guidance from DESE. Superintendent.
Yes.
Can I just jump in first, Sean, if you wouldn't mind? So if you go to page 5 of the evaluation tools, you'll see where we used to have the student learning goal, professional practice, and there were 4 district goals. So the student learning and professional practice goals were compatible with some of our district goals, so those are there. So you have 4 up there that you rate. And if you look down below in the chart, these were things that we had rated all, but you'll see in bold are the focus indicators. If you see that chart, you'll see what's bold. Those are the only ones that we are being asked to make our evaluation on. And then if you go to, for example, instructional leadership, you'll see where I added the feedback, a focus for feedback, collaboration, and support. I added those bullets underneath each whatever area we're supposed to be evaluating. So I thought it would be easier than flipping back and forth between tools, that you have basically like for example, this is in 1A curriculum, you have the 3 key focus areas that we're looking at in terms of rating the superintendent. Same thing for instruction. There were more bullets there, and so I retyped all of those into the evaluation tool and eliminated all the other ones just to make it sort of streamlined and easier for you to manage. So I think it's pretty straightforward. So you do your rating, and you know you need to put comments for a rating.
Each of the ratings outside of proficient, although it's been certainly been my practice to comment regardless of whether I'm
right.
putting in proficient, because I think the comments become part of the record of the evaluation. Again, this is a public evaluation, so we will be, once we have finished doing the evaluation, we'll compile it and then present it publicly with the superintendent. I guess, Sean, you are in the process of putting together a Google document for us that we will all have access to. Why don't you explain what you're doing?
Yeah, so I've began the making, I think, life easier for school committee. Google Classroom, where we have the Friday memos and we're adding evidence in each one of the standards. So when you open up the Google Classroom, I actually also uploaded the mayor's.
Could I ask you to just hold for 1 second?
Yeah.
Just hold that thought. We're going to change the battery on the camera, and then you can pick it back up again.
All right.
So we have a 2-minute break here, folks.
2-minute recess.
This is Kennedy. Welcome back. All right, any questions? Again, Sean, why don't you finish telling us what you're doing in terms of...
Sure. So
you're preparing
the documents that Mayor Holliday passed out, I also put them in Google Classroom. And my goal for the Google Classroom for school committee is to take each standard along with the Friday memos, but also provide more evidence tied into each one of those standards, that you have everything in one place. So as you do the evaluation, once you open up the Google Classroom, all that information will be there for you all. So I worked on that over the weekend. I also did some uploading today, but within the next day or two, we'll send that off and you'll have access to all of that. And if there's any other information that you need from me, just let me know and I'll upload it to the Google Classroom. I think you'll all find that much easier than
Going back through our Friday memos.
Yes. Yeah.
They're fun to read, and they have great pictures.
I know. Due date.
When do we think we can get this done by, folks?
Well, when is it due?
We're asking.
We're asking. We can set the due date.
I've never done one of these. How long do they normally take?
Hours.
Hours, yeah, because you want to... Yeah, no,
I really tried to streamline the form for
Yeah,
everybody
I
this year.
appreciate
so.
that. Thank you.
It is very much more streamlined, but it's still going to be, a good couple of hours, 2 or 3 hours, certainly. Because the feedback is important, and again, our comments, and I encourage people to put comments in, are really the sort of helpful anecdotal. It's an opportunity for you to point out things that you really felt were missing, or point out things that you thought were really good and may not have fit into the total evaluation. So, yeah, do we want to do this like in a month? Have it available and ready for our second meeting in November before Thanksgiving?
16th.
Sounds fair.
16th?
Yep.
Okay.
16th it is. Okay, so we would send,
Send them to me, and I will talk to Nick about, Nick used to compile them and come up with all kinds of
remember
numbers
he
and
used to do
stuff.
the nice colored charts and
Right.
talk about, you know.
Do we have this electronically somehow?
I sent it to you
Okay.
electronically in Word,
In
but I
Word.
also wanted to have the hard copy packet for you, because sometimes it helps when you've got the
Yeah.
screen up and you can go back to the
Yeah,
docs.
that went out this afternoon.
Okay.
Okay? So, if you have any questions, Sheila, certainly, if you have any questions, please feel free to contact me, or Steve. We've been doing it, Dave, we've been doing it for years.
Right. I have a comment. It's interesting how the state seems to reverse the negative to positive in the columns. I don't know if you noticed that. Like it starts with the most negative and moves to positive. Usually it's reversed.
Yeah,
Let's be mindful.
yeah, I think they're working hard down there, and terrific. Superintendent's report. Thank you, Sean. We're done. Anyone want to make a motion for adjournment?
I'll move it along, I promise.
Good.
Just for some updates, I just wanted, and I did put it in the Friday memo for school committee, but our Neighbors Table Champion Award, I just wanted to congratulate the Newburyport Public Schools for receiving their championship award for the food secure families throughout the epidemic. As you all know, Pam Keeley, cafeteria workers and food service workers, along with Kathy Riccio, really organized, making sure that our families were receiving lunch and breakfast for the week. They started in March, went all the way to June, and they're being recognized for, going out above the, the call of duty, and I can't thank them enough. And like even today, the students and families that are being quarantined, some of the families that are home with the remote, we're delivering food to their homes every day after school, which is just amazing. I had a great opportunity for the 8th grade speaker series, and as Mr. Menon was talking about, with our students asking good questions and getting involved in civics, I had amazing questions from the 8th grade students asking me about my job, my family, the background. It was amazing, and just really, really impressed.
Did you have to make a wheel?
I did, yeah.
Can you share your wheel with me so I know what I'm supposed to be doing?
I would love to, absolutely.
The Throws also did a good wheel.
Identity wheel, yeah. So they use that to ask the questions, and I won't give the student's name, but I also got an email after for follow-up questions that student didn't have the opportunity to ask, which was, I was just really impressed. And I think that's all about what we're trying to do in the district, is student advocacy and student being part of the process. So,
Yeah,
great questions.
That's a wonderful program. The teachers are tremendous, and it just really is about giving students a voice.
We also, I am going to be talking about an update on the cultural competency, but I did attend the NOC Parent Teachers Advisory meeting, which I also put into the Friday memo, looking at the curriculum and working with a diverse group of parents, and looking at our how we're teaching history, how we're teaching some difficult subjects. So we had teachers on the Zoom call, myself, Principal Furlong, Jen Groskin, and really just talking about curriculum discussions in literature, along with our history units. And this is an initial meeting for bigger discussions down the road, and how we can bring in a diverse perspective on a lot of the historical events, that we're teaching. And as you know, Jen Groskin and the history team over there is really tied into constantly gaining feedback and making changes. So that was a great meeting, and I'm thankful that I got invited to that and heard the parent perspectives, especially for our students that are black and brown, and kind of listening to their perspectives. So that's the beginning of a longer conversation and a lot of the work we're going to be doing this year.
Sean, is that group in addition to the school council? Or is that what they call the school council there?
No, this was a specific parents being called in to discuss some of the curriculum. So there might have been some parent advisory parents that are typically there, but also other ones that were invited to have that discussion around the curriculum. The NHS school rep will be here. Sierra Leahy will be added to our school committee, and she's willing to come in and work on her protocols and physical distancing, and will be part of our school committee meeting. So she'll be here November 2nd. Open houses, Mullen Open House is Wednesday, October 21st at 6:30. The Bresnahan Open House for pre-KK is going to be Thursday, the 22nd, beginning at 6 p.m. Our NHS Open House will be Tuesday, October 27th, starts at 6. Knock Open House Wednesday, October 28th, 6 p.m. And the Bresnahan Open House grades 1 to 3 will be Thursday, October 29th. We just wanted to thank Nancy Lysick. She completed, obviously, one of the most comprehensive financial reports that takes months, but Nancy's so good at it, she did it in a week. So she did, we submitted that to the state, and just so you know the thoroughness of Nancy submitting those reports, she also had Jim Bacombe also come in before, and I think you, right, Jim used to be here for a while. And Nancy likes to have another set of eyes, go over all the reporting before we submit it to the state. That's something that Nancy's put in place for additional checks and balances. And I just want to thank her for all her work. And is that the last one that you have to do?
The last large one.
The last large one. Because you won't, you know?
Yes, it's the last one.
That's why you're smiling under your mask right now. So we'll bring you back for that. No. But thank you, Nancy.
This is also referred to as the October report, in case you've heard that term before. You know, in terms of this is, I mean, it's so comprehensive. It's all charts and numbers and tables, and you know, it's budget, it's enrollment, it's, you know, numbers of special education. I mean, it's just everything. And this is required to go into the state in October. And the funding can be impacted by this if it doesn't get in. So in case you have heard that term before, the October report, it's an annual report. And this is the kind of data that goes up on the DESI website based on this report.
We also used to call it Oktoberfest, I think, for a while.
Cultural competency work, as you all know, Michael Eatman has been working with the district, the extended leadership team, this summer for 2 of our retreats, talking about cultural competency and the different areas and the competency skills of awareness, attitude, knowledge, skills, and practices. Assistant Superintendent Bick and I have been meeting with Michael Eatman. We're developing a roadmap for the district. In addition to work, we're also utilizing a mentor text, Coaching for Equity, for the extended leadership team. The idea is to continue to work with Mike and train the trainer model. So by the end of the year, many of our district leaders and district personnel will be trained in a lot of this work, working with Michael. So we had a meeting on the 11th, Saturday morning, and also Wednesday the 14th and Thursday the 15th. Wednesday's meeting, we had a great meeting with Mayor Holliday and Michael, and really tying in the work that the mayor's going to be doing with the city and with the school department. And I'm not sure, Mayor, if you just want to comment on the initial meeting with Michael Eatman.
I really appreciated the time because we want to be sure that the work that Michael's doing here in the school district, dovetails with this new Alliance on Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, that we have about 50 applicants, and we had some scheduling difficulty, but tomorrow we're meeting and we're, hoping, I don't know if we'll get through all the applicants tomorrow, but we're pretty close to being able to formulate this group, and just having the ability to have conversations with him about where we start, where we go. And I told him that I really want this from, it amazed me in terms of the diversity of the applicants who applied, their backgrounds, their work in international programs and human rights. I mean, it was really pretty impressive, the applicants we received. And so I really want this to be something that's driven by the group, not top down, but something that really is from the community in terms of what they'd like to see this alliance accomplish and set as the schools a roadmap for the city. So, and he's going to check back in with us after we get the group together to, he's really committed to the schools and certainly doesn't have the time to pick up and be part of it, but he certainly can do a little bit of work with the city group. So we'll all be on the same page, which is good.
Great, exactly. And that's our goal, is to partner, as an entire community, because these are challenging times, and what we would really like to accomplish is going to take everybody working together. So we're excited about that. The Remote Academy and just the homeschool, just for the numbers, we currently have 147 students in the Remote Academy from grades K to 8. As a high school, as Mr. Wolf said, is live streaming right now. We also, just for the teachers, we have 4 teachers, including special education teachers, working students in grades K to 5, and we have 7 teachers, including special education teachers and foreign language teachers, working with the grades 6 to 8. And as rotation is on a trimester basis, and thus far we received positive feedback for the Remote Academy as the students are following a schedule. We have 46 students who are currently homeschooling. Their families chose to homeschool their children. And really just both of these scenarios, the families feel it's in the best interest for their families and keeping their children home, during this time. So we respect that and fully work with those families.
So homeschooling is different than Remote Academy, just
correct.
to clarify? Okay.
Yeah.
Like homeschooling.
Correct.
Just check that out, okay.
Yep. So commissioners update, we had a commissioners update, and I'll just go over the topics. It was also included in your Friday memo. The attendance, he reviewed the attendance taking and the categorizing those absences. He also mentioned the COVID-19, the positive cases, reporting that to the DESE, and we follow through our protocols. The new information was on the testing that the state may be receiving some antigen tests from the federal government, and he'll get us more information on that. And then looking how to distribute that to districts. We also had a presentation on special education, and Nancy Cox will also talk to us about that in a minute, regarding the students focused, the high-risk students focused on special ed, ELL, and homeless. And then we're also going to be getting guidance around this week, he said, red status guidance from the commission. When a community goes to red, there's going to be some guidance around that that we should be getting this week. There was questions around transportation and flexibility on physical distancing in schools. And he says there's no change, no flexibility at this time for that. Or no flexibility and change in the physical distancing requirements. Snow days, we'll get guidance next week, but this year we'll be able to utilize our remote for snow days, so we won't lose instructional time and have to make days up. but it's for this year only. He was adamant about that. And I think that's my superintendent's report. We'll have Nancy come on up in 1 minute, but I also just wanted to thank everybody, you know, for the opening of school and all the work that, you know, administration has been doing, our teachers, families, students, and just being flexible and working together and staying together during this pandemic. I know it's challenging for everybody, and it's not optimal of what we're dealing with right now, but I think we're making the best in Newburyport and staying together and doing the best that we can. And once again, I can't thank people enough for their efforts, their patience, and their flexibility as we get through this pandemic. So thank you all very much. So Nancy Koch, we saved the best for last.
I wouldn't go that far.
And I also, in your packet that I put on your desk, I think I gave a definition for you all on the high need students. And that's another challenge that the state has kind of defined for districts, and utilizing that criteria to identify the high need students in those different areas, the ELL, our special education, and our homeless students. So with that being said, Nancy just has a little more information for you all.
Sure. So you have the definition of high needs, and what Sean and I spoke, and what I did is ran some numbers. So if Bresnahan has a total of 542 students, 110 of those students qualify for special education, which is 20%. And of those 110%, 110 students rather, sorry, 38 of them qualify for cohort C, which is high needs, which is 35%. EL students was 1% in cohort C, and economically disadvantaged students was 2%. And if you were to take the special education students out of the total population, only 7% of them are in cohort C, but of the special ed, it's 35%. Mullen has a total enrollment of 287 students. 65 of those students qualify for special education. 6 of those students, 6 of the special ed students qualify for cohort C, which is 9%. 2% of EL students qualify for cohort C, and 1% of economically disadvantaged students qualify for cohort C. And of the special ed students, if you look at the total population, 23% of the school qualifies for special education. For NOC, there's 495 students. Of those 495 students, 114 of those students qualify for special education, which is 23%. Of those 114 students, 12 qualify for cohort C, which is 10% of special education. If you were to look at special education just totally based on the school population, of cohort C is only 2%. EL students is 1%, and economically disadvantaged students are 2%. For Newburyport High School, there are 104 students. There's 835 students total. 104 of those students qualify for special education. And of those 104, 38 of them qualify for cohort C, which is 37%. 12% of the entire student body qualifies for special education. For EL students, there's 1% that qualify for cohort C, and of economically disadvantaged students, 2% qualify for cohort C. It's a lot of numbers.
That doesn't even include students on 504s, does it?
No.
Wow.
Nope. No.
Can I ask you a question?
You may.
This here says that in order to be considered high needs through the IEP process,
Yep.
students must meet at least 2 of these criteria. So 2 of the 3
Yes.
that are bulleted.
Yes.
And so I guess my question is the second dark bullet, the students who cannot engage in remote learning due to their disability-related needs.
Yep.
So I'm thinking there are probably students who were doing okay live with special education support and are now not doing so well because they're at home. And obviously support's going to look different, the environment's different and all of that. How is that factored in? Like, how do we decide who cannot engage?
So we have looked at data prior to school closing and their performance. We have looked at their performance in the spring. What we have said is we cannot bring every student back. And you're right, there are some who are still struggling. We are working closely with those families in terms of offering extra support to attempt to get the students engaged. We have said right from the beginning that as the situation changes, we settle in, and we gather data as the fall goes on, we can revisit. But again, it is definitely it is more data driven than it is subjective.
I guess that was my question too, like what kind of data are we using now at the beginning?
How many, if the student is, how many lessons, Zoom lessons are they engaging in? How many assignments are they turning in? That's some of the data. How is their disability impacting? I mean, we're giving parents strategies. A child with attention deficit disorder, it may not be considered nearly as high need as a student who is struggling to read.
Okay.
Nancy, when you talk about reaching out and supports, can you talk just a little bit about what that might look like? I know it's highly individualized.
It is highly individualized. So we have our BCBAs. A lot of I think the most common concern is that, and particularly with the younger little ones, are that they are acting out and they just can't sustain sitting in front of a computer. So our BCBAs are doing consults with families, coming up with strategies. CPAC just met last Wednesday on the 14th. Erin Rich did an incredible presentation on mental health. And then Principal Wolf Mr. Marcos, Tara Ellis, and Erin Rich for Mullen, and then Principal Sullivan and Miller were also there, and they spoke about what they are doing as schools and faculty in terms of addressing mental health for their students. And then November 4th, I think it is, it will be the next CPAC meeting, and our BCBAs are doing a presentation on de-escalation techniques for parents and giving strategies in terms of helping them engage in learning. So we're really trying, is parent training and support is as important as supporting the students at this point, especially for the little ones.
That sounds like a pretty huge ask of parents. We're training parents in de-escalation strategies for kids.
They're asking for it.
What's
I mean, the parents are
I know
requesting
they're asking
it.
for it, but I'm saying we've created a situation.
Well,
I say we've created the pandemic, obviously, that's not our creation, but we're in a situation, how about that? Where it's just gonna be untenable for a lot of people, for a lot of different reasons. And I guess that brings back to my question earlier about, to Principal Wolf. If people are opting out, can we think about allowing more people to opt in?
I think that's something that that's something we're always going to look at almost on a weekly basis. And the challenges with special education is the focus and the priorities on your high need students, but not understanding you're not going to have the ability to bring all students back in. So this is a real, I think, tough dilemma for all districts, not just Newburyport, but for Nancy and her team, for the students that are at home, by listening to parents and having these CPAC meetings and reaching out to families and understanding what's happening, the dynamics happening at home, we are now creating more services to provide the services at home. But we're always, looking to bring as many kids back as we possibly can, especially students with disabilities and on 504s. I mean, that's something that I know you're looking at every day.
Yes, it is.
Working with families, so.
And we're also exploring remote evaluations. When we shut down in the spring, there were no evaluations that took place, whether they were initial evaluations or 3-year reevaluations. So the psychologists, some special ed teachers, and a few speech and language pathologists met with a representative from Pearson Testing, who clearly has the majority of the market on tests, and we are looking at various scenarios in terms of testing that we can do if we were to shut down again, so students could be evaluated. So we're looking into that also.
Questions, comments, thoughts? It's a very challenging situation, obviously.
I feel my heart goes out to the families. I mean, it is not an easy situation. And if I could bring everyone back, we would, but we can't. So it is, we're working diligently to make it work for the students that we can.
Nancy, just to ask, if I could just ask Nancy Lysak a question, or Sean, as we're beginning to develop new strategies and different strategies to work with these families, because they are being driven by the pandemic, are they some of the kinds of things that we can submit for funding to some of the grants?
If it's something that's not currently carried in your budget and it's COVID related, like we've hired additional coders, then yes, you
Good.
can take their.
Okay.
But you can only do it from now until end of December, unless we get additional funding.
I'm trying to get the decision made on testing done by then.
The other piece in the commissioner's update is there is that other stimulus package that is out there that they're waiting. And I think Nancy and I, we've talked, if we do receive the additional funding to continue for the second half of the year, we're really looking at focusing on personnel and providing, I think, even more supports than we have right now, which is a challenge because as you saw the numbers with staff that are quarantining, or some staff are deciding to use leave. So that's been the balancing act of maintaining staffing throughout this to keep our schools functioning.
Yeah, no, I know that there was a shortage of teachers before the pandemic. There's certainly a shortage of specialists out there, so it is a very challenging scenario. But let's,
I'd probably do 2 days of interviews since I came in July, so we're still hiring.
And I think for our families that, that are listening and going back to what Principal Furlong said, Principal Wolf, what Mrs. Koch said, if there is a scenario, I mean, just, reach out and we'll do the best. And, maybe, as Mr. Hawkeyes said, maybe the answer isn't today, but, continue to work with the district and work with principals, and we'll continue to problem solve. I mean, that to me has been, I think, the lesson of all of this is each week as things change, as the scenario changes, we've been very flexible in making decisions that, that we'll have to do to help out as many people as that we can, so.
Could we offer, in like a next phase, we were talking about Wednesdays, could we offer like all of these families come in on, like they get the extra day?
I mean, we're looking at scheduling, but it's, we're always looking at scheduling, so yes, we'll take a look at that.
Just something, it just seems like a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
any additional questions for Nancy? Just keep working at it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Nancy. We now have subcommittee reports. I know the Joint Ed has not met. Finance meets tomorrow.
Yeah, tomorrow, 8:30, Knock Auditorium.
Policy.
We met last week. We spent most of the time talking about the fundraising. We did spend some time talking about a la carte offerings in the cafeteria. There was an email sent out that we're going to start offering a la carte, that parents could email Ms. Keeley about opting out of that ability. I think at our next meeting, there is a wellness policy that we should look at that talks about some more specifics than we had, and there's some state guidelines too that's mentioned in the wellness policy, so I think maybe we'll spend a little bit of time doing that in November and seeing where that goes. The wellness policy gave school councils, for example, an advisory role in the sort of foods that should be offered. It also, interestingly enough, also talks about fundraisers, and they should not involve food. So just some things to read through more carefully and look at, have another discussion.
Thank you. Superintendent evaluation, you have our report, and we are active. I guess that just leaves a motion to adjourn.
1 second.
Sure.
We haven't set the date yet for the joint meeting because by charter, we're supposed to meet before we start our budget process. We've just picked November to do that. Just a little bit of concern about the governor's budget that dropped last week. I'm not quite sure how that's supposed to be funded. I think it's based on anticipation of a stimulus package coming with the $2 billion something in lost revenue. I mean, I'm just anxious in the fact that, you know, our local aid was increased a little bit, and I can't believe this. So I'm just a little anxious about, and Ethan is too, but we're meeting this week. We have to have, by the 31st, any of our COVID expenses into the state that we'll be spending through December 31st, and I believe Ethan has all of yours, or, okay, thanks, Nancy. And then we do a finance team also this week too, so to talk about that. And then we'll sort of figure out where we go. I'm really not in a hurry to start working on, since we just passed a few weeks ago, the final FY21 budget. But I almost think we should maybe wait till after the first of the year, because I just don't know where we are. But I don't know, I don't know what the benefit of bringing all of us together for this meeting, and I also don't know if the city council would be willing to do a meeting, because they're still doing everything remote. So, anyway, to be continued, we'll make a decision probably this week about when we're gonna do that meeting, based on all the data we have. But as I said, I'm not in any hurry to do this joint meeting, because we really don't have much to tell you at this point, except some numbers that are out there, and I don't know.
Flexible.
We've all been very flexible, yes. And on that note, motion to adjourn.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned.